Testing 1, 2. Get the audio levels right. Yep, I think that should be good. I think we should be running cooking with gas. That should be what we're dealing with here. Namaste to everybody, to all two of you. As always, we're a few minutes late. Namaste, Gaz. Hope you're good. And everybody else that's going to be arriving and those that are going to be watching retrospectively, I hope you guys are having a great weekend. I hope that's becoming better than a great weekend. These lights are so bright for my eyes. I'm like a little old lady. I'm moaning about everything. The light's too bright for me old eyes. Well, big love to you all. We've got in the house with us as always. We got, and I'll just go around the circle in the order people arrived. We've got Dear Cosmic Prankster. And Cosmic, as you know, is he's got this relationship with the Fae, building his own system. It's an entire system with a language. He's a John D without a crystal ball because he doesn't need to use a crystal ball because he thinks the crystal balls are. Why don't you use crystal balls, Cosmic?
I just don't need them anymore. It's really that simple.
Well, there you go, from the horse's mouth. He just doesn't need the crystal balls. He's already got 2 balls. What's he need a crystal ball for?
I do like
Three's
them,
a crowd. You do like them? Yeah, I love.
Yeah, they look cool. I can't deny that.
I got a whole collection of them for my work, but they're like, I haven't used them in so long because like I don't really need them, but they are good to use, and I need to go and dig them out. I gave my girlfriend the biggest obsidian ball I've ever seen in my life. It's like this big. Big obsidian ball. I've got a big silver sheen obsidian ball, but hers takes the cake. It's almost 2 kilograms. So it's like 1.5 kilograms. It's pretty. It's a lot. Well, that's like more than 3 pounds. Yeah. It's more than 3 pounds. It's a big one. A big one. So
I got obsidian ball too.
Yeah, obsidian
and quartz.
Nice. Yeah, I've got a lot of Himalayan. So that's Cosmic Prankster. He channels, and he doesn't channel like the weirdos channel. He's just got a relationship telepathically with the Fae, and they are constantly checking.
Yeah, my channeling, well, the way I do it is different than, so like, everybody knows about like Bashar and how he just kind of like lets them like talk. You kind of like talks to them. I actually do when I channel with other people, I actually do it through text. And so basically what I do is I'll have somebody will ask a question in like chat or on Telegram, and then I just like type their response. And what's interesting about doing it this way is that it actually gives the person you're channeling it with an opportunity to actually hear the spirit's voice in their own mind. And I think that's kind of like when other people like speak through their own words with their voice. It's kind of like they're connecting to the human being. But there's something about like when you read a spirit's message, it's like you hear the spirit sounding those words out in your head. And by doing this, I actually help other people connect to these same spirits just by like when they interact with them, like, oh, now I get this, because you just, learn what their presence feels like and their personalities. Yeah, man.
Well, there you go. That's Dear Cosmic. And then we've also got Indy Sage, who is an anthropologist by trade, although he's also deeply embedded in the Tao and the Taoist alchemy and Western alchemy as well, Hermetics. And also he's very deeply engrossed with many of the latest sort of scientific bylines that run parallel to these ancient ideas and cosmic ideas. So yeah, we've got Indy Sage, dear brother. He's also had his close run-ins with SRI groups. So he's got a lot of experience in the old SRI, like how to escape an SRI initiation you didn't sign up for. And so he does a lot of shadow work in this regard as well. Welcome, dear brother Indy. How are you doing, dear brother?
I'm doing quite well. So glad to be here today. And as Franklin mentioned, I have my irons in many fires, and I've been working on my master's degree in behavioral sciences, but I do a lot of research outside of this in the colleges and universities, and I've developed a practice of shadow work, and it's been very helpful for me. So I've been paying it forward to my community, and it's been really great. And recently I've been getting involved in some more stuff, and some shamanic work and some shamanic ceremonies and stuff, and thinking about getting Yoda certification so I can teach. Maybe I'm gonna go to India to get that, so that could be pretty exciting.
Did you say Yoda?
Yeah,
Yoda.
I think I said Yoda, but I meant yoga.
Okay, yoga. Cool. I was like, dude, Yoda?
I heard
That
Yoda
sounds
as
like
well.
a cool certification to me, dude.
Mine's at Yoda with May the Force be with you. I was out dancing pretty hard last night, so I'm still kind of waking up right now. Bear with me.
Nice. Lucky you. Well, I don't know. I've had options to go dancing, and I just like, maybe it's just because, like, once you have a kid, you're like, I don't want to go somewhere where I don't take my boy. And I don't think he's quite ready to go to the psytrance party yet. Because the last time I was there, I saw another like 10-year-old kid picking up bags of cocaine off the floor. And I was like, I don't know whether that's appropriate. And the kid was like opening up the bag and he was sniffing, like looking at it. And he was like, okay. He looked around and he looked, this will suit you quite well. And he gave it to like the right bloke. And I was like, he knew who not to offer it to. Let's put it that way, which is pretty scary for a 10-year-old boy to be that, aware of these harsh realities. And, so I'm very scared of going to any of these sort of parties these days because it's just far too much white powder and nonsense floating around. But that is the way of the world, is it not? So, yeah, we've got a cool little discussion on for today. Esoteric relationships between man, animal, plant, and mineral kingdoms. We've brushed on this topic. We've been on the dance floor rubbing our booty against this topic's booty. But now we're going to undress her. We're going to take her home. We're going to wine her. We're going to dine her. And we're going to show her a good time. And hopefully she's going to show us a good time too. So where would you guys like to start undressing this beautiful lady?
I always like to talk about whether animals have a soul. What do you guys think about that? Do animals have a soul, or is it exclusively humans?
I've been thinking about this question a lot myself. It's like it's tricky because it's like their consciousness is definitely different, but I think they have a kind of soul, if that makes sense, but not in the same sense that we like have a soul. So, from what I've learned from the Fae, they kind of look at reincarnation as kind of like an evolutionary process where each reincarnation you gain higher basically levels of awareness just because you're evolving and sort of morphing and changing or whatever. And to me, like when it comes to animals, like I don't think all animals necessarily have self-awareness. I think because I think self-awareness actually comes from interacting with other people. It's not simply a matter of, you being born with a body. Because I think I sometimes I question if some humans have souls, like there's like some people who are just total psychopaths. And I think to me, the reason why I think is that because I take consciousness and I'm able to simply measure it in Zerfaxes, right? So if you think about it, an animal has at least one Zerfax of awareness of its own individual will, and then it has another Zerfax where it's kind of like the universal nature will kind of interfering. But as humans, we have more Zerfaxes of perception. We have the outer, 5 sense world, but we also have this, this inner world, which is another Zerfax and a Zerfax of self-awareness. So to me, it's not a matter of like, because I think in a sense, like everything does kind of have some kind of consciousness to it, but it doesn't necessarily have that kind of human-like self-awareness. Like it might be kind of like a more like a non-egoic consciousness, like sort of like when you take a lot of psychedelics and like you don't really have a sense of individuality and you're basically kind of just like part of the group and you're sort of melted in. Maybe that if you're an animal, that's like your default state, right? Where you're just in that kind of like collective consciousness, and then through a certain level of, just self-discovery, initiation, evolution or whatever, you then develop self-awareness, and then that consciousness kind of goes on to the next level. So I'm kind of like, when it comes to consciousness and the whole concept of like evolution, I think it's not that evolution is not just biological, it's evolutionary, that consciousness evolves and it shifts. And so I would say that from the phase perspective, they define things as zerfaxes. So a human being has sort of like a kid zerfax in sort of the physical dimension, and then a kid zerfax in the indeterminate zone. And then sort of the combination of those two things is essentially what creates the cell for the individual. Whereas if an animal, so I look at the animal as, it's not that I say it doesn't have a soul, but it has a kind of proto soul. It has a kind of pre-soul that it's developed, but it hasn't fully developed. And I think that like the soul then develops when it gets to its next incarnation and it reaches a certain level of sentience and becomes human. So it's a complicated question to say whether they do or don't have souls, because for me, my answer is kind of like a yes and no in a certain way. So yeah, that's my thought on it.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Thank you for those insights. A lot of people have gravitated towards the understanding that's been passed down to us from Rudolf Steiner. And in Steiner's teachings, it suggests that the animals do have somewhat of a soul, but he suggests that it's somewhat stunted from impulsivity and indulgence of the impulses of the carnal body. So they let their emotions kind of get the best of them and fail to raise to a higher consciousness like humans have. Which is an interesting take on it. I like that idea. It's not exactly how I feel about the matter, but it's pretty insightful and gives a lot more credit to the animals than most people would give.
And I think too, like you also have to consider like the phenomenon of like feral children. These kids who they never grew up with any parents. They basically lived out in the wild, right? It's the classic raised by wolves. And these kids, they don't know how to talk. They don't know how to socialize. They're basically just in that preset animal consciousness, right? And I think it's when you as the parent, talk to your child and you interact with them and you teach them things about the world and themselves. It's like, that's how that soul essentially kind of develops in a way. There's like that aspect to it, because it seems like, because I think this is the same thing with animals too, that in a sense, when you own a pet and you communicate it, I think that let me think of it like this. It's like, I don't think animals, like this is a framework I've been thinking. Maybe it's that animals don't necessarily have a soul at the start, but by us human beings giving them a name and giving them an identity and loving them, that we're essentially giving them a soul. I always like that idea.
That is an interesting idea, because like, when we talk about a soul, like, how do we define what a soul is? It's like, it's a term like God. You can have 10 people having a conversation about God, but they all have a different idea of what God is. So they think they're talking about one thing, but like, you're talking about toothbrushes, you're speaking about pencils, you're speaking about carrots, you're speaking about cars, you're speaking about boats, you're speaking about airplanes, but we think that we're all talking about the same thing because it's somehow that God word is a catchphrase or a catchment term. And I think that the word soul is one of those kind of terms. So like, what is a soul? How would we even begin to define what a soul is? Well, how would you guys take a crack at that one?
Well, I think first we have to make the distinction between the word spirit, because I feel like a lot of times in these occult spirit, the word soul and spirit tend to be used interchangeably. So I think that if we're going to first define the soul, I think we need to distinguish it from spirit to like make it more, make more sense.
Well, spirit, I would say, comes from the root of the word spiral, spir. And spir means to breathe through the spiracles. The spir is also related to a spear, right? So it's a spear. The spear is bringing life. It probably goes back to before there was a bow and arrow for the archer, there was a spear. And you would throw your spear. So it's a long range thing that you can reach a target. So spirit would then have to be that insubstantial substance that permeates everything. How would you guys think of that as an idea? It's an insubstantial substance that permeates everything, and everything breathes spirit. Would you think that as a term?
Yeah, I think so. And the teaching that I'm doing right now as a spiritual practitioner trainee for the Ernest Holmes Creative Thought Center that I'm at over here, we suggest that spirit is everything. It's kind of like a law of one situation where everything is spirit, and there's a law of spirit where like what you imagine, you create. And so like if you imagine like unconditional love for one and all, you're creating that in the world around you, which is a beautiful thing. But if you harbor any doubts, you're creating those doubts to manifest. So in a sense, like by having the thought of desire, you already have like subtle unspoken doubt involved within desire, because it's like I want something, which implies that you don't have it. So things are like pretty interesting in this idea, but basically they suggest that since spirit is fundamental to everything and everything comes from spirit, they say that the mind comes first, the spirit is mind, and spirit allows thoughts to come into our mind. Once we have thoughts, then that's part of the effect of spirit. But spirit is the unseen causal force, which is very similar to the idea of the Tao. So I like that idea that spirit is within everything. And in Shintoism, in ancient Japanese religion, they believe that all things have a spirit within them, even inanimate objects. And so you can kind of imagine like that inanimate objects have feelings and like maybe even facial expressions that you could imagine. And people that have taken like mushrooms might have had this kind of experience before, because it kind of makes your facial recognition brain kind of more active. And so you can see faces that aren't there, or maybe they are, but you're able to see things that you normally wouldn't see. And a lot of people tend to look the same. So if you see somebody, you might think, oh my God, that's my friend. And they look like everybody looks like a doppelganger of somebody. So that's kind of an interesting thing. But I do like the idea that spirit is within everything. And, you know, you could think like the spirit of Mother Nature is within everything. The spirit of the Heavenly Father is within everything, or both. And I like the idea of both.
Yeah, speaking of mushrooms, I've been thinking lately that like what those visuals you actually see when you see everything sort of melt and like things distort and change, you're actually I have a theory that you're actually viewing multiple realities simultaneously, and that distortion is an effect of that. So it's essentially like a higher dimensional level of perception where you're essentially, because in a lot of ways we only think about the reality we exist in. We don't think about all the potential possibilities. Well, when you're on psychedelics, you become aware of all the potentialities. That's why I think you get so paranoid sometimes, or you freak out in a certain way, because you'll find some kind of dangerous potentiality of, you know, something that exists out there. Like maybe you see a cop or whatever, and then you hyper fixate on it because it has that kind of like that hyper level of awareness. But as my determinant for the concept of spirit, I don't know if I really have a word for it anymore. You know, the thing is with this system I've been working with is like I've almost had like a complete dictionary overhaul with how I understand like a lot of words, because I used to have like, you know, when it comes to my opinions on God, like I always be like, you know, I'm like an atheist, or maybe I'm a believer. Now I'm just like total question marks. It's like, how do you even answer that question? What does that question even mean anymore? Like whether there is or God or not. It's just like, it's so vast, massive. It's almost like the universe. I mean, that, you know what? It's like, is it even relevant at a certain point? Because it's like, it's almost like if you look at the universe as being this kind of like this organism, and it's essentially a kind of an organic conscious entity. I mean, it's almost like it kind of already implies a sort of God anyway. It's already kind of implicit sort of within nature itself. So I don't know. Like with the word spirit, I'm like, I'm not really sure how that makes sense in my paradigm anymore. You know, like it's a whole different kind of way of looking at things. So, but I would say that I think that when it comes to consciousness, I think that there's the two kind of vectors of it, right? There's the like my whole concept of awareness and being sort of intersecting into each other to create the individual self. So I would say spirit would be like the masculine, and feminine forces, Zith and O, within the universe, then sort of the Iserfax, which is the Zerfax of the self, that comes when those two forces align to each other. I would probably say that is the closest equivalent to a soul in the system that I work with, because it is a very much an emphasis on, you know, the individual identity existing as its own Zerfax. So that's the way I look at it. The term spirit. So, but I don't know.
Yeah, to go back to I never got to answer the question of what is the soul, so I'm gonna go back to that briefly. But to me, the soul seems to imply that there's a place where the soul resides that's somewhere beyond this place, and that it returns back to, it's like the heavenly kingdom or maybe primordial source. And I feel like that kind of implies that we have a soul that comes from some higher place that comes to inhabit us here, that gives us our special consciousness that we have, whereas animals don't have that. They're just more connected to earth. I think a lot of people take that position. And I personally feel that animals have a soul that's more divine, that's more deeply interconnected to the cosmos and to the causal forces. I feel like humans have a soul that's been kind of confused and lost right now, and we're going through a transitionary stage where we don't have instincts to thrive in nature, so we're trying to develop those, and it's not going to happen until we start to develop coping mechanisms and means of sustenance that are mutually beneficial with the natural environment around us. And I think right now, a lot of the things that we do are at the expense of the world around us. And so we have like kind of a lost, broken soul, or we're fallen right now. But I feel like we could learn from animals how to become and thrival again. And they have a deeper interconnection with the natural world. They still live within their instincts, which are kind of natural to them and intrinsic. But I feel like humans do have these instincts. I feel like we're taught to eradicate them. When we're babies, we could live in the water where babies can thrive. Most terrestrial mammals don't do so well in the water after birth. And they can usually jump up and run or climb, but humans seem to be more of an aquatic hominid because we can really operate well in the water after birth, but we can't, even on land, we can't even hold our head up for months. So that's really unique to us. We see other animals that do that, like felines and canines. Predatory animals tend to also be of a similar nature at birth. They're very helpless. But humans are arguably not carnivorous. And so the fact that we're somewhat connected to primates, or so they say, shows that there's something off there, because primates can just jump up and climb right after birth and they can hold their head up just fine. So the fact that we don't have a coat of fur and we seem to be like well suited for aquatic habitation shows to me that we do have instincts to thrive, but we're not allowed to explore them. And so the babies are taught instead to walk and speak instead of swimming in full thrival. And I always wonder what people would be like if they allowed those babies to swim in an aquatic environment. It's a curious thing that I've always wanted to explore. But basically, I feel like animals have so much to share with us, and I feel like we don't really, when we hear them say their songs, we don't really necessarily associate it as a language. But the more people start to become familiar with the songs of animals, they start to pick out the complexities of it and the implications of it. There's certain calls that are called to do a certain thing. Whereas some animals have like a very simple song, others have more complex and diverse songs that they can sing. So to me, that kind of shows that certain animals have a lot more wisdom and understanding. And certain people have been able to said in the past, in the ancient past, to be able to talk to the animals and understand their words. So I try to work on interspecies communication, and just intuitively by looking at an animal in the eyes, you can pick up volumes of information. And I think part of that is just believing that it's possible to be able to be receiving of it. A lot of people just are of the assumption, no, animals are dumb, they don't have any thoughts. There's no sense in trying to conjure some kind of meaning out of their presence or anything. We know how they operate. They just want food or something. But I don't really feel like that's the case. I feel like animals have a lot more to communicate to us. And it's said that dogs are here to protect us in the physical plane, and cats are here to protect us in the spiritual plane. I feel like there's something to that. Cats, owls, ravens, various creatures of the sort help connect us to the unseen. And
I
I
wonder
feel like
if
they
language
can.
has a lot to do with it. Because, like, think about how your mind is affected by learning language and sort of like talking about feral children earlier. Like, if you really think about it, you tend to really start like remembering and developing memories when you like can fully speak English. Like, when you're an infant and you can't speak, you don't develop memories because you don't have like a mind or an ego and using language to sort of catalog all of your experiences, and you really don't think about how having a language, having a written, oral language changes your perception of reality, because now it's like you can use words to kind of imagine alternate realities. So um to me, I don't know if animals necessarily have this particular capacity. I think maybe like in mammals, like dolphins and apes, I think you're probably getting some level of that, because I think dolphins have a language, and apes can, like, they have the capacity for like communication and stuff. So I think in a lot of ways, I think that it's not so much that animals don't have souls, but without a kind of a language to sort of articulate and understand your sense of self, is I think they don't have this. They definitely don't perceive a reality in existence the same way that humans do. But to say they don't have a soul, I mean, sure they have feelings and all of those things. But I really do think that like being taught a language, has a lot to do with the development of consciousness and the soul.
I think we're delving into some pretty interesting points here, and we're really like deep diving, and it might seem like what we're saying isn't on point with the conversation, but I think we're going to tie this in quite beautifully, because I think it's really relevant as a foundation. And namaste, dear Kali. How are you doing? I hope you are well. Welcome to the zone. Namaste, Artuition. Hope you're good. Namaste, Howard. Howard's got a new picture. Nice. New picture. Always good to have new picture. Otherwise, yeah, getting back to the topic. So I've got a couple of things I was going to share with you people. So etymology. Let's make sure the volume is off. Let's see what we've got here. So we'll start with the etymology of the word spirit. So English, the word spirit traces back to the Proto-Indo-European, which is like the oldest roots that we can find. Space or space. Notice the word space has got to do with space. Isn't that interesting? So the word spirit has got to do with space, meaning to blow or to breathe. And that's from Proto-Indo-European. And the Latin spirare, to breathe, spiritus, breathing, breath. Then they come and add the word soul in there, but I think that's some kind of modern person. They add the word courage in there, the rage of a cow. Okay, we'll get back to the rage of a cow. I love it when cows have rage. Have you seen a cow with a rage? You don't mess with a raging cow or a bull. So, like, is spirit. So yeah, I mean, I think like the words spiracles and breathing and that ability of energy that can become embodied. So if the spirit is the energy that is moving through, then what would the soul be? I think of the soul as a container, personally. I think of the soul as a container through which the spirit can move. Without the soul as a container, the spirit would have nowhere to enter and permeate. So we look at this. Please tell me this is on the screen. Oh, thank God it is. Otherwise, I'm yapping at you guys and you can't see the word screen. So we've got the word soul. Originates from Old English word, thawal. 8th century is when it came into English, 725 AD. Very interesting date, huh? We're talking like the banging peak of the Dark Ages. From the Proto-Germanic sewalo, meaning spiritual. Once again, we'll take a moment to consider that. or probably a better way to understand it, the immaterial aspect of a person. I like that. Old Norse, we've got Sala. Old High German, we've got Seula or Sela. Modern German, we've got Seele, Seal. Yeah, Seele, Seal. And Dutch, modern Dutch, Ziel. Okay, then let's dive just a little bit deeper. So we're going to go into the Proto-Germanic word Sewale. Sewalo. I'm not quite sure how to say it, so please forgive me. This is got to do with soul, or relates to spiritual life, according to our anthropologists of modern time. The Sea Lake Association. Okay, that's quite interesting. They're related to a sea or a lake. That sort of makes sense because the spirit could be seen as little tributaries and rivers that flow in and out of a lake. And the lake could be the container that contains the water and redistributes the water, because it comes from the mountains, enters the lake, and from the lake, it leaves the lake to go to the ocean. That makes a lot of sense. I can see that as being a midway point between the ocean and the mountains, which is probably a really good way of looking at it. Then we go slightly deeper, and the Proto-Germanic Saola, right? The sea lake. And we start looking at the pi root hypothesis, right? That's a Proto-Indo-European root of the word. And so we've got two roots here. We got some linguists connect it to the Proto-Indo-European so-he and she-wens. So it seems like a reconstruction of these two words, somehow reconstructed, blended together. So then we take it to the next level, and we go, well, what is the word Proto-European for the so-e, right? The so-e, Proto-European, and the so. I'm not quite sure if I'm saying that right. So is the sun. Now we're getting really somewhere, because the sun is sort of like a container for energy as it redistributes cosmic energy towards its surroundings, acting as a hub. Think of it as a hub. So that's like a really interesting that we see the and then the English word for sun, soul, is the Greek word for soul, and soul is literally. And I find it funny that when we're hearing the word soul, they don't relate it to the soul word of ancient Greek, because it's laughable. If you want to get right down to it, it's absolutely laughable. Or sorry, is it Greek or Latin? Helios, the sun, seen in words. Is soul the soul Latin name for sun? I just want to be clear. Why did I think it was Greek? Okay, so soul is the Latin word for sun, and it's obviously got a relation to this Sohi of the Proto-Indo-European, the Pi language group. So we can see that's the first part of the conglomeration of the Sohu. And then the second part, which is Sehi. So Sohu and Sehi becomes Soe, which is to bind or to tie. Now we're getting to the idea of a container, right? So if you were to combine the Sohu and the Sehi, it means the sun and to tie or to bind. What ties and binds the energy of the sun? That would be the two words in conglomerate. And so this will relate to, like, a rope, a cord, or a string. Derivative words: rope, cable, cord, bond. Indo-European, binds, rooted in Sehi. So I think that's probably quite a good series of etymological links to sort of put us into an idea of understanding the roots of the word soul. So it's binding the cosmic energy that comes from the sun, binding it. And in my idea, the metaphor of binding means there's some kind of containment, right? It's containing it somehow, which means the soul acts as a structure, as a container. We also saw that the soul has got to do with the part of ourselves that's not visible. So I think the self, the ego, is probably a good word for soul. And when I say the ego, I don't mean the new age interpretation of the word ego. Just to be clear, I mean the original meaning of the word ego, where the ego has got to do with the deepest aspect of who we are, as opposed to the persona. The persona is what we show the world. That's the mechanisms that we think about ourselves, the way that we identify ourselves, and the way that we portray ourselves is our persona. That's our personality. And our ego is the deeper emotional motivating presence within us that motivates us to behave. So I think the idea of the ego, the idea of the soul are intrinsically connected. And like, for example, like my little guy here, my little pretty little guy. Hey, have you got an ego? You've got an ego, haven't you? Hey, he's got a little ego. I'm going to go and put him into bed in a minute. He looks like he's tired, although he fights me when I try and put him into bed. Oh my God, he gets really angry. Animals do have a certain amount of self-awareness. He's like a child. He gets aggressive. He starts fighting me when it's bedtime. No, you're not putting me in that dark place now. No. I want to play. I want to be up. I want to be awake. Just like my 9-year-old boy. The dogs, my dogs are like kids. You know, I often say like it's very hard to distinguish between a kid and a dog. You know, if you put them all in a room together, you might mix them up. Go, damn, you know. People complaining to me, why is your dog sitting in front of the class? Like, what do you mean? Like, put your dog in front of the kids' class, and, like feed your kid in a bowl on the floor. But I mean, you know, without being silly, there is so much similarity behind the way a dog's psyche is arranged and the way a little boy's psyche is arranged. Obviously, now my boy's 9, he's outgrown the dogs. But if I look back at what he was like when he was smaller, there was very little difference between him and a dog in terms of his psyche, how his mind works. And I say that because I've got a Malamute that's extremely intelligent. Like, I mean, highly, 60% wolf genetics. You have no idea how intelligent a wolf is, right? When a Malamute play fights with another dog as a puppy, they don't play fight conventionally. They circle the other dog and they learn to take their heels and pull their legs out under them, behind them. Because that is their strategy, right? Their strategy is that if they can get behind the other dog and disable their back legs, that dog won't be able to fight. That's like some serious like art of war stuff going on there, you know, if you think about it. And little Pekingese, very intelligent as well. Pekingese dogs, the little dogs, very clever. They make up for what they don't have with brawn, with having a certain intelligent kind of behavior, especially emotional intelligence. You should see how that dog turns on the cuteness and the charm when it's feeding time. And he comes to me, he puts his like little paws on top of me. He does this little stretch and he stands up and he does this little thing and he's like reminding me like it's feeding time. And he comes and gets all lovey-dovey and like he's a little actor. Put him on a stage, mate. Give him an Oscar. He's there to go. He's good to go. So I think like what you're saying, Cosmic, does hold some like water for me personally. Just observing animals and living in the jungles with animals as well. Elephants, oh my God. When you look into the eye of an elephant, like let's say there's an elephant standing right in front of you and you're looking into its eyes and it's looking into your eyes. It's very human. It's a very human exchange happening. It's a very, I see you and you see me. There's a very self-conscious exchange happening between you and an elephant that I cannot put into words easily. All I can say is it's as tangible an experience as you have looking into a human being's eyes. Now, I'm guessing that's the same for looking into the eyes of a whale. Maybe a dolphin. I haven't had like eye contact with whales and dolphins, but I'm guessing that that's what eye contact with a dolphin or a whale would be like. The baboons as well, very intelligent. And when they look at you, they're like sort of sussing you out. Like they're very, very thought oriented. They're checking you out. Like, what have you got? They're weighing you up. Has he got a bag? What's in his bag? Is there any chance he's got food in his bag? Do we stand a chance against this one? He's a bit bigger than the other one. Would we be able to take his bag off him? They'll like come and try and have a sniff close to you, stand close to you and sniff to see if there's any food smell in your bag. They'll study your bag. How fixed is that bag? If I grab it and run, will it break off? Will I get the bag? They're doing all the math. So they're very, very, a lot of ingenuity, baboons, very, very clever creatures. So I would say, ouch, that was sore. It's a bite on daddy's ear, very anal, hey? You should make anal bites, hey? Oh, it's a bite daddy's ear, very, very sore. I'm going to bite my finger. You're going to bite it till it bleeds. Don't do that. You bit it really sore now, eh? That was really, really sore, my darling. Oh, who's a moody little bugger, eh? So, wow, it bit me pretty damn hard. So, yeah, you know, animals, I think what you're saying, Cosmic, has got to do with the learning. Although, you know, I think animals have names. I don't think it's just up to humans to name animals. I think they have a language. Like I've watched the birds, spent a lot of time watching birds in the wilderness, and I'm telling you, those birds have got a language, man. And they've studied the languages of crows. And the languages of crows have got quite an extensive vocabulary. And they noticed that the exact same sequence of sounds that means she's got a stick is the same sequence of sounds for she's got a stick, like in other towns and other places. And they actually make new words. Like if someone's got an air gun, they'll make a word for watch out, there's an air gun. And they'll be warning each other that person's got an air gun. Watch out for that one. You know? And they'll probably have a word for if he points that thing at you, make sure you stop moving. You know? I bet you they have that level of intricacy. And we've studied that with the crows because they seem to be the most intelligent of the birds. But I think that all birds have a fairly extensive language, personally. And there's no reason to believe why the crows should be more or less. You know, they might have a different kind of intelligence for problem solving. Doesn't mean they've got a better linguistic brain. Because we often notice that having a linguistic brain and a problem solving brain are not always the same kind of intelligence. Some people might be very poor linguistically blessed with linguistic intelligence, but have streetwise intelligence for being able to solve problems really fast. So I think animals have got their own names in their own little communities,
but like
and
humans,
we just don't know them.
But like humans, I think they also develop that vocabulary, you know, over time and through. Just like, you know, we humans, we had our evolutionary phase. But I think when it comes to evolution, I think we also shouldn't look at it as like a total linear thing where it's like humans are at the top, then birds, reptiles, et cetera. Because I think that when it comes to evolution and how animals evolve and develop, it's not just, you know, I think it's like some animals evolve into other organisms while some kind of maintain their own thing. It's kind of like how in the human world we have liberals and conservatives. You have the liberal types who want to morph and change and, you know, become something different, become radical and revolutionary. And then there's other people who are conservative, like, no, let's keep things the same. You know, this works. You know, we don't need to change anything. This has been good for us for 1,000 years. So let's keep going. And I think nature is the same way. Like there's certain animals that are like, yo, we need to, you know, evolve. We need to evolve wings. We need to evolve this because we got these predators around. And man, if we could fly, that would really be awesome. Whereas other animals are like, you know what? We've got it pretty much figured out. We don't really need to do much else anymore. It's like, I got the things I need. And I think that, so when it comes to like animal intelligence, for example, in a lot of ways, it's like, even though humans like are kind of like higher up in the evolutionary ladder, Darwin wise, the birds, in a sense, they still have that same. They're still going through evolution, even though it's not necessarily a physical evolution. That if you have something like a language, maybe that's the thing with languages. Like once you start like a language or in that mode, it kind of snowballs and becomes into this like larger, kind of thing. Because when it comes to Zarfexology and like the whole concept of the Izarfax in itself, it's not necessarily limiting it to human beings in particular. Basically, it's not saying that only human beings are capable of developing Izarfax, but it seems that there has to be, in order for true self-awareness, there needs to be an awareness of an inner world and an outer world. And I think that animals that are purely in that pure animalistic state, they only really kind of perceive an outer world, but they don't have this kind of inner world of like dreams and landscapes, etc., at least not right away. And I think that language, whether it be a human language or an animal language, helps one to access that other part of their psyche, that inner world. And then, so I think that in order for there to be a self, there has to be an inner part of experience and an outer part of experience. Because if you think about it, you have the outer experience where you see the world, but I also have the inner experience to distinguish myself from the environment. And language often is the tool and the key that we use to distinguish different objects in reality that we see around us. So in a lot of ways, I think that, crows probably are intelligent, but they went through the same kind of evolutionary process that humans did. They went through the same, learning process like every other organism. So in a way, I'm not against the idea of other animals evolving, to be at a level of sentience that's equivalent to a human being's. But I think there's a kind of a step-by-step process to get to that level of perception, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I reckon they've been doing it. I think like animals, just like human, have an ancestral memory that they pass between each other. So this animal learns this and it hands it over to their kids that then have the knowledge of the parent. And then they teach their kids and carry the genetic codes for the information to their next kids. And so all the animals are carrying like a huge genetic repository of all of their memories that all of their ancestors have learned, as well as the actual teachings from bird to bird to bird to bird, or dog or cow or whatever we're talking about. And I've noticed this like very clearly, like when I've had dogs, like when I lived in Guruji Ashram in Nandeshwar, and one of the German shepherds, she had puppies, and the Guruji was giving them all away, and the run to the litter, no one had taken her, and I had ended up looking after her because she was not going to be alive. And he ended up giving her to me and saying to me, no, she's a special one. She needs a special family. I'm sure you're the one to find it for her. So I traveled with her for like a year and a half, fell in love with her. She was my baby. And then I found her the perfect family with children and cows. And like, it was just the perfect home for her. And I had to like, oh gosh, I have to say goodbye now. It was the hardest thing, man. But, it was for her best interests. Let's put it that way. And she took on so many traits from her mom. Now, her mom was an extremely intelligent dog. Let me give you an idea of the mother, right? She would come there and I would feed the mother treats, keeping some treats aside for the baby, but she wouldn't eat the treats. She would go and fetch her baby and bring her baby and put her baby by the treats and get the baby to eat the things first. And I'd be trying to feed her and she was like, no, she refuses to eat. She wants to see her baby eat. And so like, she had like a real intelligence and a compassion. I mean, this isn't just an average German Shepherd. This is a German Shepherd that lived in a Guru ashram where everybody was practicing sadhana. So, not your average German Shepherd by a long shot. But she was very inbred, extremely inbred. And so some of her inbred tendencies and her inbred genetic issues went through to her puppy. So she liked the idea of eating excrement, for example, which was just disgusting. Any excrement of any animal, she'd be all over it. And so I had to keep a holster with a toothbrush handy, you know. No, you're kissing me with that face, buddy. Yeah, we got some tooth powder. We're cleaning your mouth out, buddy. Get some natural tooth powder and clean her mouth out so that she's got clean mouth. But I think animals learn from their parents, cosmic, in the same way that we have. And I think we've disrupted that natural flow with our educational institutions. I think that's an interesting point for us to maybe look at how humans have moved away from being natural in the way that animals are natural. Like traditionally, right? You would imagine that you would have carried on the trades of your family, right? You should have, right? So I suppose like my father's father was like deeply involved with the occult somehow. And my father's mother, she was Shanahan, Irish lady. She had knowledge of like birthing children, and she was midwife knowledge and how to read children. And she also had she was born with a core as well. So she also used to give people advice and serve them a cup of tea and then look at the tea leaves and be able to tell them about their future and stuff. So I suppose like you could see like somehow I've disrupted that process. I decided not to be educated in universities. School for me was boring as hell. And I decided to embrace the occult and this other spiritual technologies, if you will, because it's so deeply embedded in my bloodline. But most of us don't, right? My father my father became, he became a tradesman, but he was actually a musician. The trades were more like fallback things. So he was a performing musician. I suppose I've gained the music from my dad, but I decided not to turn that into money because I could never, in my mind, want to develop music and monetize it. It just didn't seem like my it didn't seem like a driving force in me. But I think like a lot of children are not inspired to follow in their parents' footsteps. And I think like this is something which, what do you guys think? Do you think this is maybe not so healthy with regards to the continuity of the information learning, the sharing of information from father to son, mother to daughter, mother to son, father to daughter, to bring in the genetic information activated and carry over the information from the grandparents and great-grandparents in order to have that flow of information? Do you guys think we've lost something in this modern age?
I mean, I think you're onto something here, because it's definitely kind of the case that I think like this younger generation has probably hated its parents more than any other generation, man. They're just like I thought I was like as every teenager is obviously somewhat, annoyed with their parents when they're growing up. But they're like, Jesus Christ, these people, they want to murder these people. Like, oh my God, it's like, dude, calm down. But yeah, there is this kind of this sensibility that in this modern world that I think that there's more of a praise of the wisdom of the youth than the wisdom of the old. And not that there's anything wrong with the wisdom of the youth, but we don't really respect the wisdom of the old in this day and age. It's everybody's got to be, you got to be the new thing, and oh, that's so old, that's grandpa stuff. That's not what the new kids are into. That's the classic things changing with time. But yeah, there's definitely kind of a lack of sort of that like familial respect and being part of a lineage and respecting history and stuff like that. At least I don't necessarily like listen to a lot of the music that my parents listen to, but at some level I respect it. My dad likes a lot of like classic rock and stuff, and while that's not really my go-to for a lot of music, I can still respect that this is the thing that influences a lot of the music that I liked growing up. And the newer generation, they're just kind of like, they don't have and they don't have that mentality at all. It's just like, oh, it's old, it has to be bad, it has to be terrible. And I think it's probably the same with like spirituality. I think that in our modern age, there is a kind of concerted effort to take the family apart, take the kids and the adults and try to separate them and get them to sort of fight against each other. So yeah, I think there's definitely something to what you're saying there.
you know, and it's really interesting. I think, like, you know, for whatever reason it's happened, whether it's deliberate or whether it's just, you know, I think it's deliberate, but, you know, who knows? There's probably, it's nuanced. There's probably like parts of it that's deliberate and parts of it that's not. Just, you just start one domino falling due to one thing, and then everything else is also going to sort of fall in that way, because that's how dominoes fall. But you know, I look at what we've lost. Like you say, the lack of respect. Like, soon, give yourself a while, Cosmic. You're going to be too old to talk occult with the kids. You're going to be like me, dude. You're going to be like, no, dude, you're a has-been. What are you going to know about the occult? You know? And it's quite funny, because in the old times, like, even in my generation, we used to still have respect for the elders, in as much as, whether we agreed with them, whether we believed them, we would respect the fact that they had experience that we didn't. It was sort of like a natural thing, right? Like, if you were learning anything and there was somebody that was old that was going to show you something, you would actually pay more attention, because you knew, oh, this person's been doing it for a while. They must know what they're doing, you know? And that has been lost, which to me says that our skills are going to decrease, right? Humanity, our skill sets are going to go
It's
down
already
the
happening.
tube. Yeah. And I think it's going to get worse because of the younger generation. And if our younger generation is like that, what could the next younger generation be like? And my little boy, he's 9 years old, and he's challenging me. He's challenging me about, like, what's right and what's wrong. And I'm like, dude. And he's telling me, no, this and that, because he's using Chat GPT. Like, so, you know, I don't know how I feel about that, but it's part of the education these days for kids. They're learning about it. So he wants to ask questions of Chat GPT, and I'm like, well, I can't shelter him too much from the world, right? Because the world is there and he's got to live in it. And I can't let it be a shock to him, like one day, oh my God, there's Chat GPT. But I'm constantly educating him about how toxic and dangerous these AI are, and that you can't rely on them. And he was telling me how Chat GPT, like, has a lot more knowledge than people. And I was trying to explain to him that's not really the case. He was like, no, it is the case. I was like, well, where do you think the Chat GPT got that knowledge? And he stopped, you know. But he was quite happy to argue with Daddy. No, he knows better. He knows better. And he's only 9 years old. I was pointing out to him, you know, that Chat GPT has been trained with people. It's been watching and listening to what people say, and it's repeating what it's heard from millions and millions of people all around the world. And it's got a big reservoir of information that it's trapped in, but all of the original ideas come from people. And he was like, oh, is that where it comes from? I was like, yeah, it's trained on people, dude. It's the people intelligence that Chat GPT is exercising, or pretending to exercise as its own. But really, it's just looking at previous conversations and trying to sort of calibrate an answer that's relevant to what it's seen in the past. So I think, like, this is a big thing with the younger generation. And with animals, getting back to the connection with humans and animals, perhaps humans not being so connected to our parental line of information and knowledge disconnects us from our ancestral lineage of knowledge, disconnects us from animals. What do you guys think? Do you think that disconnects us more from animals because we become different to them?
Yeah, I think there's something there. I feel like we have a big difference between animals in the sense that we kind of latch on to needing linguistic instructions to live our lives and having technologies to cope with, whereas they kind of are taught to just kind of emulate their kind and just watch what they do and do what they do. And it'd be interesting to see what happens when animals are separated from their kind. But when humans are raised as feral by other animals, they emulate those animals just like an animal would emulate each other. So it almost seems like humans have the potential to be just like an animal unless we're exposed to other people, which to me might really tie back to the fact that we were amongst the gods, and like maybe it was a breakaway civilization, maybe they're from another place, maybe they are really advanced in ways that we just don't have completely. Some people seem to have these advanced ways, like they can levitate or move things with their mind or see through time or space. So people can like develop these abilities, but it's not something we all have available at our fingertips. But it's not to say that we couldn't all develop it if we worked hard to be able to become more advanced. But I feel like there possibly was like an ancestral race that we called the gods and the angels that actually had a way more advanced capabilities. And we find these like elongated skulls like across the world that had like huge brains that were like nearly like maybe twice as much as ours or almost that. And they seem to have had capabilities that were more advanced than the things we can do. And so I feel like people maybe of the assumption that they have regular industrial technology that they made out of like metal ores that they mined or something. But to me, I feel like more of the research I've done has shown that they really do things with their mind. They can use just naturally occurring things like crystals, lattices, and develop technologies with Mother Nature through the mind, not through their hands, through building things like we do, but through like extrasensory perception and telekinetic powers. They can somehow seem to like be able to rearrange things with their mind. There was a story that I heard about Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god in Mesoamerica, where they suggested that the Quetzalcoatl was able to create a brilliant home for himself merely with the powers of his mind. He was able to like mine through the earth to find ores and made his house to become silver on the inside and gold on the outside, and then had shells and gemstones encrusted on the walls, and had feathers for a roof. And he was able to just kind of like gather things with his mind. And they said that he was able to just with his mind like look at the side of a hill or a mountain and then have various things just emerge from it and then like form into a structure. So like this stuff seems to a lot of people to be like science fiction or just kind of like mythical or just stories that were embellishment or imaginative. But I like to look at a lot of things across many cultures, and there seems to be a lot of mention of these kind of things from the gods. So it seems like we have a kind of a different way of going about things. We're able to use um like different metals and ores and crystals with our hands and like chip at them and like form them into like a device that we hold. And like we can do certain things with them, like make fire out of a flint or like create like magnetic resonance with like certain crystal bowls that we make that can vibrate at chakral frequencies and heal parts of the spiritual body and emotional body and stuff. But I feel like our way of building technology is markedly different. Like if we look at the Bugosphere that was found that operated for like 12,000 years, it's been dated to have been created 12,000 years ago. It doesn't have like when we have human technology, you look at things, there's like seams where two different parts were made where you could create the inside and the outside and they were fused together. And then there's like a seam where they were welded on that seam. The Bugosphere doesn't have anything like that. It seems to have been created from the molten state without any type of like industrial crafting. Like it was almost created with like telekinesis of the mind or maybe just more advanced like ways to fire it up. I mean, I don't really know, but it shows that it has fiber optics and copper dots that are able to receive and transmit information. And it operates from static electricity to be able to be its like levitating propulsion factor. And these are things that we haven't been figured out in our society. And they're starting to work on these things. And people are claiming like, oh, new scientists develops a way to create levitation with static electricity. And people that know about the Boogosphere are like, well, I think I know where they got that idea from. And they have like these hydrogen powered vehicles right now, which is the water powered car just being given a new name. So I think sometimes people steal like technologies from people that are really advanced and just rebrand it and pretend like it's new and it's their own thing. But I feel like we've been trying to do that with UAPs and UFOs, USOs for at least for like about 80 years now. If you look back at the Roswell incident that happened in, I think, 47, but Admiral Byrd was able to come in contact with them earlier than that, like in the 30s, maybe even back to the 20s. So we've seen those in the modern time. We also have like witnesses from the ancient past in artwork and in drawings and different glyphs on the walls. So this kind of stuff seems to be around us. I feel like there's a greater advanced race that has more power in the mind. Whereas like we're kind of somewhere in the middle between that and the animal. So I feel like a lot of people don't develop spiritual ascension and higher consciousness, but some people do, like a smaller portion of our collective do develop those things. And I feel like once, like humans can be in a place where we have higher consciousness than an animal when we develop those kind of capabilities. But I would say that most people are not as capable as an animal with their consciousness. We're able to choose, we have the free will, which I don't think necessarily is good, to choose to do the wrong thing. And I feel like animals don't really have that choice to do the wrong thing or something that's out of their nature, whereas humans can. And so I feel like we are in a place where we could become like really like degenerated cognitively and like choose to do terrible things. Like we'll see things like, oh, look at this like most beautifulest place ever seen in the world. Like let's just turn it into dollar bills. Let's just destroy it and leave a bunch of toxic waste in its place and make it into like a mansion and a yacht for me and my family or something like. And that to me is nothing close to the sovereignty of an animal where they're divine and thrival and they're effortlessly just doing the right thing all the time. Whereas humans try to do the right thing. Sometimes to them what's right is like to just make some bank and just like exploit the heck out of nature and each other and ourselves. And it's sad. But I feel like we have a lot of potential. We're all over the map. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think this is interesting. Our tuition was asking an interesting question earlier, and I think you're completely on point. Humans, possibly it's our conditioning that has caused us to become so obsessed with the final product, money, dollar bill, because of the way that our economies operate. It's probably pushed us in that way. I want to see if our tuition and namaste there, animal, animated, human frequency, Viken Kokozian. That's a mouthful. Welcome indeed. Our tuition, I was just asking to dip into talking about the relationships we have to plants, minerals, etc. Oh yeah, our tuition. We're getting there because we're establishing the ground roots. And by the way, I'm having a local brewed ale, and it's so damn good. I bought 2 ales today with my shopping. I saw it on the food shopping. I was like, oh, ale. I haven't had an ale in like a couple of months. Oh, I'm definitely going to have one of those. And I got 2 of them. They're the little bottles, but they're the local brewery here in Chapman's Peak. And it's like old-fashioned brewery style. It's not like commercial beer or something. It's like a small little brewery here in Chapman's Peak where they make artisanal, ale. And I was like, dang, I got to get me some of that. Nice to see the supermarket stocking the good stuff, because like I would never drink awesome. Like a commercial beer or something. It's just
yeah, it's where I live, like in Asheville nearby. It's like supposedly like the microbrewery like capital of like our country over here, and they have like so many different microbrews. There's like all these different breweries you can go to, and they're all so different. It's really good. But beer supposedly like ties back to ancient Mesopotamia, and they would drink out of these like clay earthen pots, and they would have these long straws that they would drink from, which is really different from the way we drink it now. But apparently,
they were
it
looking
was
for something.
until Einstein carbonated beverages, apparently.
Yeah, I don't like bubbles in beer. That's why I like ale, because it doesn't have bubbles. It's like old school. So yeah, our tuition. I think that's a valid point. How far are we in? We're into the first hour, so it's probably a good point to start also adding to the register, right? Our connection with plants. But before we can start our connection with plants, right? So we're establishing our connection with animals. To summarize what I think, and I'd love to get you guys feedback on this. I believe that our organs are animals, in a sense. They're like little animals that coexist within a system. And you get different kinds of animals in the same way that you've got 3 different beings that coexist in the Portuguese man of war, right? And they're 3 individual beings and they coexist as a single entity. I think our organs are like this to some degree. It's just it becomes more fused as time moves forward. I think it becomes more situated permanently as beings. So I think like symbiosis between animals is a big thing to look at, and then symbiosis between humans and animals. You know, dogs, cats, their place in our world. Why would humans have had birds? Think about it. I've got cockatiels here. Well, if a snake came into this lounge now near my child, do you know who's going to tell us first? The birds. They're the most perceptive. They see everything. Their eyes are like little eyes, like ching, 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 everything. So they start talking, you know. If my son's going near the bird cage, they tell us, hey, there's a risk here. There's a threat. What's the it's Joshua? What are you doing? What are you doing the birds, you know? So they started to see him as a threat now because he's so wild, and they find him like overwhelming. Like you grab them and bring them out of the cage. I'm like, dude, you can't take them out of the cage on your own. You need mommy and daddy's permission. You know the drill. They're not playmates. You can't take them to your room and play with them in your play castle, because that's not how birds work. You know, they're fragile little guys. So the birds, I think, are symbiotic with humans, that they would be our advisors. They would advise us about small risks. There's a scorpion in your premises. There's snakes in your ground, in your home, in your bed, you know. And you know, imagine you're getting into bed and you don't know there's a snake in the bed, and you sit on top of a snake or a scorpion. Like imagine the drawback, how that would ruin your night's sleep, especially when there's not a doctor surgery down the road. So I think there's a lot to our relationships with animals and our symbiotic relationships with animals, and how animals have become a part of our life. We're sort of connected spiritually on the world of soul. I think our souls are connected to certain animal group souls. And I think there is definitely a soul presence in animals. And I think maybe not all animals have got soul. Maybe like a soul is like an ant hive, maybe has a soul, right? Maybe the ant doesn't have an individual soul. Maybe it's part of a collective. But I can tell you now, of observing and moving with the ants, they are self-aware. Imagine 2 lions facing off against each other. You're telling me there's not self-awareness there? This lion's sussing that lion out. Am I going to win? That lion's sussing this lion out. Am I going to win? Have I got what it takes to put this one down? The other one's thinking, have I got what it takes? That one's thinking, maybe I can outpsych that one. Is that one likely going to be scared of me? So they are evaluating themselves while evaluating the opponent. Think of what that means in a showdown between 2 animals. There must be self-awareness. Otherwise, how could that happen? Because very often they'll stand there and they'll do a little display of, and that one will go, no, I don't think I can take that one. I'm just going to go this way. There's no point fighting. I'm not going to win. You know, how do they figure that out if they're not self-awareness? If there isn't the self-awareness to know what are my capacities versus what are the capacities of that creature, right? I think animals have this inherent self-awareness that we're not fully aware of, but it's just on a different level. So I think that the souls of animals become connected to the souls of humans. And I think that there is a resonance. Like, why do some of us look like certain animals? Like, okay, let's look at Bush Whisperer's face. What do I look like? What do I look like? There's something of a bird likeness in my face, I suppose. There's also something of a cat likeness in my face.
Yeah.
You got a little bit of horse likeness in your face. Yeah, you can see a little bit of horse likeness in your face.
Yeah, I have like
also,
a long snout.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a long snout a little bit, and my face can appear kind of thin because I have like a long beard and like tall hair. But without that, it doesn't have the same appearance. But maybe we model ourselves to look like certain animals. Like I have the goatee of the goat, maybe, and
There's a goat there too.
I think the idea behind this is called like, is it physiognomy or something like that? The idea that human faces do tend to resemble other like animal faces, and that's something I've noticed pretty much my whole life. There's like some people that look more like birds, some people that look more like cows, you know, some people that look more like horses or whatever. And if there's always something, or more like a lizard, whatever, you know. Everybody, and I think that makes sense though, because if you think about what a human being is, it's like we're sort of like the intersection of the animal world. We're the nexus where all the animal consciousness sort of like intersects into itself. Because in a lot of ways, it's like for every animal that exists on a planet, there's a human being that has a personality that is a representative of that particular animal. It's like in a way, it's like there's no human. There isn't an animal in the world that doesn't have a human being that looks like it.
Yeah, it's interesting how people can look just like an animal and like have like the physiology of like an animal's feature. Like some people have like a real like bird nose where it kind of like goes out and down. They have like a very long nose and it resembles a beak. Whereas like other people have like a very flat nose and that kind of resembles like maybe like a seal or like sometimes like various breeds of a dog or something. But like people have various eyes that look like maybe like a bird's eyes or like a horse's eyes or something. Like people can have wide eyes or eyes in the middle. And so like there's so many different features of people, and like kind of their mannerisms sometimes resemble an animal, not necessarily just their appearance. And I could always tell what the spirit animal of a person would be when I look at somebody. And I feel like Franklin, you have somewhat of like the appearance of like a seal or a sea lion, a little bit. I see that in you. And people have said that I look like a kangaroo when I was younger. And I like that. That's kind of fun. But I also think like Franklin mentioned that various parts of the body could be like an amalgamation of various animals. It'd be cool to make this into like some kind of an art piece. Like the ears kind of represent kind of like a snail or like a shellfish kind of, and the brain kind of resembles like an octopus, and like the intestines kind of resemble like a snake, and or like an eel. And then there's like other organs that resemble other things like anemones or um, corals or something like that. And then there's the muscles kind of resemble like I don't know, like maybe the muscles could be like
Muscles in the body.
yeah, like kind of like the inside of like a shellfish a little bit. They have like a lot of muscular appearance of their bodies inside. But then there's like the hands kind of represent like a crab or like a spider kind of thing, because there's a lot of fingers and legs or whatnot on them. And then we have like the let's see, the teeth kind of in the mouth like represents to me like kind of like I don't know, like something. What comes to mind is like the octopus's beak kind of thing. It's like concealed within lips, you know, and like the eyes are connected to the brain. But I feel like the mouth and the tongue kind of like are subtly connected too.
You know, it is interesting when we look at these things, because I think like there is an element of like, for example, I don't like that my eyes are so close together because it's very predatation. It's very predator like. Predators have like these little eyes close to each other because they're like a predator. But I don't have these big canines or anything. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm obviously not. But it's interesting how this physiognomy says so much about our nature. In some way, I am a predator. Like when I have an idea, I go straight towards it. I don't take it from the start. I like to confront. I like to confront things. I don't like to, some people have like eyes that go on the side. They'll like move around things. I don't like to move through. I'll rather move through something. Like it's like a personality trait that's sometimes a pain in the butt. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's not good. But so it's interesting, like how much our characteristics are from the animal world. And we can read so much of our character and our personality by looking at our physiognomy. And I think like that's like really powerful. And then when we look at animals, we're going to make the link between animals and plants, right? And trees. Gosh. So I've had these experiences with trees and plants. And they've become gateways for me into other worlds, plants and trees. And they've become like I've experienced kind of telepathy with trees, but it's a very different kind of a telepathy than you'll have with animals or humans. Very, very different. Like you got to be prepared to sit and wait a long time to get one little piece of impulse information, whatever it is that you're picking up. And so that like the relation comes from different trees, different animals, and different trees and plants seem to speak more about our character. Isn't that an interesting concept? Like some people have a spicy character. They got like a bit of chili in their character. They're spicy. They're hot. I'm quite hot in a way, hot-blooded. My girlfriend keeps saying like, "Aren't you cold? Are you warm enough?" I'm like, "Yeah, wearing a t-shirt and like it's cold usually." And like, I'll warm up the whole bed. Like I'm like a heater, dude. Like, like I'll warm up the whole room just being in the room. And not now, Josh. I'm busy in the live. You can have half the packet of knickknacks. Let your mommy decide. No, tell your mommy I said she must give you half. That's the end of this conversation. He's finished his supper and I wants to eat knickknacks because Daddy bought some spicy chili knickknacks, but only half the packet. Like that's it, has to be regulation. But yeah, so the relationship between the plants and the trees and the animals, how the trees are, okay, let me start by an experience from another reality. I'm going to use the word heaven to describe this experience because it's so abstract I can't put a word to it. It's places that I've lived in before I was alive. Somehow, somewhere. And it's from my past and my future. But anyway, without getting tied into when or where it is, like this place where nature is so beautiful, it's so lush and it's so perfect. And we don't walk. We travel. We just travel where we need to travel, right? It's like we fly, float, fly, whatever. And the different tribes have different things. Like I'm a tree person. So in this realm, I have a relationship with trees. Some of you won't have a relationship with trees. Some of you will have a relationship with the air. and you will live on the ground, but you will have a relationship with the air to make a boundary around you to maintain your environment, like a force field in the air. And I mean, I don't know all the other beings that live there, the other people, how they work. I just know like my experiences of being there. And, I've spent some time there. And so I have this relationship with trees in this reality. And I know that there's other beings out there that have other relationships other than the relationship with force fields that live on the ground and with the trees. There's something else too, but they were like somewhere else. They weren't like in my immediate vicinity. Those that have the force fields with like that live close to the people who live with the trees. And my relationship with the trees are that like I am one with that tree, and the tree grows to my specs, to my specifications. So the tree grows an environment that encapsulates me, my requirements. So you don't cut the tree, it grows into your home because you become one with the tree and it becomes your place where you live. And it customizes itself to be exactly what you need through telepathic inference between yourself and the tree, because you're not separate. And this is a very interesting concept, and I don't know which heaven this is, because I know that there's other heavens too. This is just one place that I have been. And to get there, you travel through a plant, right? In order to travel to this place, you've got to go through a plant. When you get there, it's very disorienting because you want to carry your thought processes from this world, but then you have to recognize it takes a time to digest that the laws of physics are different there, right? The laws of physics are not the same as here. And it's not the astral plane. I want to be clear, right? It's not the astral plane. It's not the etheric plane. It's another living plane of existence, something separate. And there's a familiarity when you get there, like, oh, it's this place again. It's been a long time since I've been here. And when you're there, when I was there, interestingly enough, I mentioned an obsidian ball. I had a sheet of obsidian on the tree. And you mentioned something, Indy, about how the obsidian got there. I manifested that obsidian out of the earth, out of that planet where I live, that place, right? I didn't go and mine it or make it. I scanned downwards into the planet, and I brought up the essence of what is obsidian, and it crystallized on the place that the tree had grown for me, where there was a big space, and that was my sitting space. That's where I sit. And I would sit and I would remember. And so I would sit in deep phases of remembrance. And in that remembrance, I'd be remembering times when I lived here and other times, and times in the future and in the past. And so this is my job. I think everybody has their unique job. My job is to sit and remember. And I've got a big black obsidian underneath me. And, then I remembered that there was someone else I needed to connect with. And they came, and then they had the place to sit and remember as well. And so this relationship with plants and trees, I think, is intrinsic to our psyche. It's like the negative aspect of our beings. Like the animals are relating to the positive aspect of our beings, the active external parts of our beings. But the plants and the trees seem to relate to the negative aspects of our beings that are not here. So I think that we are rooted somewhere else in a heaven. And part of our being is rooted in that heaven. And that being is remembering the dream that we're dreaming here. But we're actually there while we're here. And the plants and the trees are our access point to that place, which is, it holds precedence over here. Are you guys following me? Indy, Cosmic, does this make sense to you guys as like a polarity?
Yeah, I can feel these powers in trees. They're really deep powers. I feel like when people talk about hugging a tree, like you just like the tree, you want to hug it. But when you hug a tree, you get the ionic powers and charges of the earth, which usually are barriered from by having a rubber sole on our footwear. but you can either have a walking stick or hug trees to be able to connect ionically. But I also feel that each individual tree carries great wisdom and can connect us to other places. And it kind of like, if you sit and meditate by a tree and let it touch you, it kind of like gives you this like energy where it can put your mind into some kind of a memory or some kind of a deep connection to another realm. And I think the trees have a lot of wisdom, and the Taoists would talk about ancient stones and trees carrying great wisdom because they've lived through many seasons and many years, and they carry the wisdom of all that time where they've sat there contemplating their surroundings and gaining a deeper understanding of it. So I feel like humans can also access that through being with a tree, being close to a tree, whether you're touching the leaf or the stalk of the tree, the stump. There's a lot of powers there that you can connect with. Ancient wisdom.
I think it's kind of interesting, your description of this kind of this world. It's kind of making me, the idea of, we dreaming ourselves being here and our actual selves being somewhere else. This is something that the Fae have been kind of talking to me about, in terms of how the fact that we essentially, that human, their conception is that a soul essentially exists in 4 places at once, right? You exist in 4 like different Zerfaxes. I think there's like one of those meta Zerfaxes that we don't necessarily adhere to. That might be where our true self lies. And what we experience as our individual self here is a sort of a Zerfaxagonal perception, projection onto this realm. So essentially, it's like we're in that realm you're talking about, and we're astral projecting ourselves here into this realm. And so when we die, it's like just basically like waking up from a dream.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually what it feels like when we're crossing over. It's like you literally feel this feeling. Like even if you're not asleep, even if you didn't pass out, that feeling of like being pushed through a bubble, but then there's this feeling of yawning and this feeling of yawning. Like I can't explain it. It's like a concept. It's not a physical yawning, but you feel like you're yawning and you're opening your eyes more and you're opening your eyes and you like that feeling that you have in the morning when you're still sort of waking up. It's a very tangible feeling. We're going to get that when we cross over for sure. That's what I experienced when I drowned, and I was pushed through the bubble. So and I think that makes sense from a shamanic perspective. The whole idea of dream time, it also adds up. It's very funny when we have these experiences because they're very hard to put into words and terms, and the idea of how a plant, the plant sucked me in. Okay, so I didn't choose, like, okay, now I'm going to go through this plant. I was just looking at a plant, thinking how beautiful this plant was. And the plant just went like this, and it sucked me into itself. And it was like a very weird experience. Like, holy crap, the plant's like swallowing me whole. And when it swallowed me whole, it's like I came out the other end of that place. So like plants are like gateways. That's what I think they are. I think they're like gateways. I think they're like living, energetic, living gateways. Think about what a plant does, because like after that experience, it made me really question what plants were. Like holy crap, like they aren't what I thought they were. Okay, there's something going on here that's very occult, very mystical, very esoteric. Like, how the heck did that plant swallow me whole, my whole consciousness, and burp me out there? And when I was brought back home, I was traveling backwards through the same plant. Very distinct memory, right? So I was pulled inwards, frontwards through a plant. And when I came back to myself, I was moving backwards out of the plant back into myself, which is like The plant did it. I don't even think I did it. I think the plant did it. The plant decided you are ready for this experience, and it did it. And I was like, oh, wow, what are you doing to me? It was that kind of experience. It wasn't like me going like, now I'm going to travel through the plant. No, I was like a bystander. It was like, holy crap, you're doing what to me? You're taking me. Oh, holy crap. You swallowed me. Like, it was very weird. At first, I didn't know what to make of this experience. And then it spat me out. And I was like, okay, this place, I remember this place. And then my mind was like, oh, look at these trees. And I was thinking, oh, I can make a home out of this tree. This is a nice tree for a home. My brain was starting to like think like, ooh, I can like take that branch. And then there was a shock that came at me from the tree spoke to me. It was like shock. Like, why would you do that? And I was like, what do you mean? Why would I do that? And it was like, no. And then it showed me like, you and me, we're one. Like, I'll grow for you. Just let me know what you need. I was like, oh, right. I just go place an order. Like, send the waiter around. I'm ready, And so it was a very like almost disturbing experience of realizing like everything that I've learned in this world is like irrelevant. But the idea of plants being this gateway, if we look at what they do, so we talk about the soul, right? And we're talking about the soul as being related to the sun, which is life, and gives life to everything, and the feta, the tying things together. So the soul is what ties together something of the sun. The energy, the spirit of the sun is tied together to make a structure, and that's the soul, right? If we think about it in those terms, then what does a plant do? Well, a plant translates the information of the sun, right? It translates the information of the sun into sugar crystals so that our bodies can maintain life. Okay. But what does this process mean backwards? Like, okay, so that's one way that the process works. It takes the cosmic energy of the sun and turns it into crystals, which are sugar, and that's photosynthesis. And it does it to generate energy. It doesn't need anything to do that, just the sun. The minerals that the plant needs and eats through the roots is just so that it can build more parts of itself. That's the only reason it needs minerals and salts, potassium and magnesium and all the different minerals, silica for the cell walls and what have you. So, the plant is then acting like a translator of information. So if you take that energy pattern backwards and think, well, how can a plant then act in reverse? Because if there is a movement of cosmic energy being turned into crystal, there must be an equal but opposite something happening, because this is how the universe works. Universe works in yang and yin. And if there's one thing pushing, if my hand's pushing against the table, on some way that table's resisting pushing against my hand. But we don't think of the table pushing against the hand. We think of our hand pushing against the table. But there must be some inherent table pushing towards against your hand for your hand to be able to have that reaction of the negative reaction of the table pushing against your hand, if that makes sense. If we apply that to and fro concept to the plants, then what does that mean? It means that the plant has the ability to, and this is anything that's photosynthetic, I believe, has the ability to take the presence from this world and translate it into pure energy. So the plant can take a crystal and move a crystal into energy in the same way that it takes energy and produces a crystal. And so that made me think about like, oh, that experience. Okay, so that makes sense, because the plant was acting in the opposite way to producing sugars with me, where my consciousness, you could think of, is the final product, but it's being pulled back into its primordial state. And so a plant is like a converter that converts primordial into crystal, and then can take the essence, what's bound within the crystal, and return it back to its primordial state. So it's like a two-way current. And so what do you think of this? What do you guys think of this cosmic India? I don't know if cosmic's here or in Sandwich Land or but what do you guys think of the idea of plants being this sort of two-way conducer? I don't know if even know if conducer is the right word.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because like you're talking about like the sunlight, but there's also the earth aspect of the soil that the plant is embedded in. So a lot of ways, the plant that's being grown is a kind of a sexual interaction between the sunlight and the soil sort of intermingling together. And this kind of ties in with the whole Fae theory they talked to me about, there being a sort of a masculine and feminine aspect of consciousness in the universe that essentially creates, certain organisms. And I'm also thinking that maybe in the same way that there's like a male female like dynamic, I've been thinking, what if plants and animals are like that? Like plants are more like feminine organisms in the sense that they're sort of just like, they're absorbing in sunlight, whereas animals are more just kind of like, about the body of the world and consuming things and, taking action, moving around. And I always thought, and if you think about how they, the air thing about how, humans breathe out oxygen and plants take out carbon dioxide, they take in our carbon dioxide and the oxygen, there's that mutual exchange of gases. So I think there's a kind of in the same way there's a dynamic between men and women, I think there's also a similar kind of like masculine feminine dichotomy that comes with plants and animals.
I love that you mentioned the way they breathe. I think it's so relevant. The fact that they take in CO2 during the day, and then they take off the carbon and they build onto the carbon and they pump out the oxygen. But then at night, they take in the oxygen and they pump out CO2. I find that incredible if you think about it, that a living being can have two different modes of breathing. And the two different modes of breathing are based upon different electrical principles, right? When the electricity of the sun is upon the plant, it breathes in CO2. When you take away that electricity, it breathes in oxygen. And that's like really quite mind-blowing if you think about it, right? Because humans are like one thing. Mammals and animals are one thing. Plants are two things. So that's interesting. Like, I never really put that onto it, but I like that you brought the breathing in. What do you think, dear indie brother?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more going on there than people have come to understand. To me, the idea of the plants being more advanced than all the animals is very paramount to understanding that, like, there was an invention called the Earth Ship by Mike Reynolds. He went to the top of a pyramid in Mesoamerica and received this channeling information that plants are the most evolved creatures and that they are able to, without needing locomotion, have everything that they need be brought directly to them and live in thrival. And so he created the Earth Ship based on the idea of a plant being like collecting the rainwater and purifying it and storing it underneath the building it into a berm or like a hill so that it has the radiant energy of the earth to protect its roots or whatever. And then it has the green room in the front to utilize the power of the sunlight to like be like a grow room. And it also is an insulation room where it only gets so hot in the summer and so cold in the winter, but it's always 72 degrees inside. And they used to have the old times like cold storage, like where they would bring in their like jarred vegetables that they would store and just bury them inside like a side of a hill. And they would walk in there like maybe down in the ground, and it was always cool in there as long as they kept it shaded and it's in the earth. And so the power of that is like really powerful. But I feel like plants seem to really work alongside animals as like kind of like a servant to the animals. It's almost like they were designed to give us everything that we need. That's like our complementary aspect. And I've been able to channel some information that plants are developed by prokaryotes, like the mitochondria that we have. and that the prokaryotes are the ones that actually design nature and build the things. Maybe they're like the building blocks of the source mind, but they're fundamental to like the energies of the animal cell, and they're respirators for the plant cells. So I feel like the mitochondria designed the plants to complement the animals, but in a lot of ways it could be like the other way around. Like the animals were designed to like complement the needs of the plants, potentially. Something I never considered. But it almost seems to be that way because plants developed the ozone layer by breathing out the oxygen after taking in the CO2, and then eventually creating a ozone layer of O3 in the upper atmosphere, which allowed the animals to finally come out of the sea and join the plants on the land. But interestingly, there was a growth that used to grow that looked somewhat like a tree that no longer exists before there were trees, and a lot of animals in the sea were there before the trees came out onto the land. So there's some of those things are like the shark and the horseshoe crab and the octopus were in the ocean before plants had come out of the sea, supposedly, which is pretty interesting. But I feel like plants have a certain way about them. If apparently, according to like Egyptian legends, if you use certain seeds, a woman urinating on certain seeds when she's pregnant can determine whether the child is a boy or a girl. And recently I've heard that, and I don't know how old this wisdom is, that you can put a seed in your mouth and on your saliva, and by being exposed to your saliva, it will then compensate for whatever nutrients that you need when it grows. So I think plants are very receptive to their environment and then can create things that will foster a balance in the world, in the environment, to the person that's growing these plants, to be able to give them the pieces that they need to have that balance and harmony in their world. And of course, the shade of a tree is like really important, because if you look in the canopy and take like a temperature in the canopy or in the tall grasses, it's a lot cooler than it is in the hot sun, like on the sand. And without plants to shade the soil, all dirt kind of gets dried up and turns to sand. So plants and trees have huge impact on the natural environment and cooling effects, especially during times like now where we're going through like a global warming catastrophe. And they can really cool things down to a large degree. And me being in a temperate rainforest here that's like 300 million years old, you can really tell that it's a lot cooler here than anywhere else in the country, because we have so great of a canopy here that's been unimpeded for so long. And there's these spruce pines here, and the spruce is what makes it a temperate rainforest, because they carry these mosses around them symbiotically, and the mosses retain the moisture and they create a lot of shade, and together they make a lot of moisture under the canopy that will then like rise up when the hot sun penetrates and create these mists that rise, and you see the clouds rising from the mountains, and it's really magical. But yeah, trees are truly divine beings. They do so much more than we realize. Mushrooms do a lot too.
You know, this causes me to think about something that I think is quite interesting. I'm going to share it with you guys here because it's a little bit mind-boggling. I can't believe I've never thought of it before. Plants and chromosomes. Okay, so rice has, do they mention it here? I don't know. Yeah. Rice has 12 pairs of chromosomes. It's 24 chromosomes. Human beings have 22 pairs of chromosomes, right? And a 23rd pair of sex chromosomes. So 46 separate chromosomes, 23 pairs. 12 pairs for rice. Maize has 10 pairs. It's 20 in total. 5 pairs, 10 total for some plants. Okay. Then we've got 44 chromosomes. Okay. Who's got 44 chromosomes? Arabica coffee. Isn't that interesting? right? Regular dailies have 22 chromosomes. Many selectively bred, large-bloomed or ornamental daylily varieties have 44 chromosomes. The eucalyptus tree have 44 chromosomes. And plant that has the most. Now, are you guys ready to have your pips blown, as they say in South Africa? This is what I call a pip blowing moment. And your pip represents your head, right? Your mind. Can you guys see that number? 1,260. 1,240 recorded. So this is the Ophioglossum reticulatum. Ophioglossum reticulatum. I think I got that right, luckily. And that's the netted adder's tongue fern. So we're talking about fynbos here, right? We're talking about fynbos, aren't we? Of course we would be. Their massive count occurs because of polyploidy, a genetic superpower where the plant accumulates multiple complete sets of chromosomes. To put this into perspective, humans have 46 chromosomes in our cells because plant cells can duplicate. By the way, you know the platypus? The platypus has got like more chromosomes than human beings. How many is it? How do you even spell platypus?
Platypus.
Oh, yeah, you're right, with a Y. Spelled it wrong and I let Google help me. Platypus, number of chromosomes. I think they got like 50 something.
I was actually just Googling now, like which organism has the most chromosomes, and apparently it's like some single-celled organism. So that kind of maybe suggests to me that maybe it's like with less chromosomes, there's more like coherence, like there's more like structure behind it. Maybe it's like they kind of like you refine it as evolution goes further. It's an interesting way of thinking about it.
Oh, the transgender people are going to love this, right?
Oh, yeah.
The platypus has got 10 sex chromosomes. They've got 5X and 5Y. So with the platypus, it's not simply male or female. There are divisions of maleness and femaleness. Isn't that cool? Hey? Like that they've got, and then they've got autosomes. Autosomes, you've got 42 of them. Those are the non-sex chromosomes. And those are the same number of, no, they're not. We got 44 autosomes for humans. So that's interesting. We've got 2 extra autosomes and 8 less sex chromosomes for humans. Because for humans, it's like we only need 2 sex chromosomes, it seems. And even that, our genetic code gets it a bit confused sometimes, because sometimes children are born with both sex parts, one dominant. Very rarely they're born with both sex parts, both active. You know, very difficult for the parents, because they then get told that the child has to have the SNP, because there's no way this child can grow up like that. But that's an interesting question. What do you think about that? I've known people that have the hospitals have told them they have to choose a sex for their child because their child has both active genitalia when they're born. Have you guys come across that much? Okay.
I have a friend that suffered from having a hermaphroditic situation, and I think like her and like Jamie Lee Curtis, like they just really are mostly a female, but they have the parts of a man, but they're not like fully functional usually, because I don't think that they would have. I don't think they have testes. I think they're born with just like a extra large clitoris, pretty much. So usually they opt to just become a female, but I think I've heard of situations where they have more parts and they could choose between the two. But it's fascinating. You don't hear about that too much, but it happens more often than you hear about, I think.
That's very interesting. I knew someone who actually had to nominate, because usually the hospitals will just do the surgery, right? Like if it's an underdeveloped male genitalia, and it's not a very common condition. It's quite rare, right? It's like a very small percentage of children that are born with both sex parts. But usually one of them is damaged or not developed, or sometimes, very often, both of them are not fully developed, and one's like 80% developed and one's 30% developed, and they won't be able to have babies. But very rarely, well, a little bit rarely, one of them's totally able to have babies and one of them isn't. And in extremely rare situations, that child could both be a father and a mother one day. Like that's like just what a head trip, like having to decide for your baby, are they going to be a boy or a girl? Right? Because they could literally be anything. And why can't they have both bits? Can you imagine how exciting it would be for them, like growing up? Like, they could be interesting adventures for them. I'm sure like partners would find that exciting. Like there are a lot of people out there that would find it exciting. But anyway, that's like really interesting. And getting back to the connection with the plants and the plants and the animals, like this idea that plants might be more evolved, and what Cosmic's saying, that less chromosomes might be more, what was the word you used, Cosmic?
Like more like streamlined, more like, you simplified it and you got to the point and you figure out which chromosomes you actually need. Like it's a more like quality over quantity kind of thing.
Interesting concept, quality over quantity. Yeah, that's an interesting idea, isn't it? With plants, yeah, I know, I completely get you people, welcome Spill, how do I say that? Welcome Spija 75. Namaste, big love to you. Hope you're well. Hope you're having a good day. And everybody else that's rocking in the chat. Yeah, you sometimes they're internal. You're right. That is something which I think is more common than it was more normal. It was a normal practice in the 19th and early 20th century, was it? To leave them on, you mean, so that they could like proverbially dangle both bits, as the saying goes. But yeah, it's not a decision you would want to make for a child, is it? Mahalos. Yeah, it's fascinating. Like when we look at plants and sex and avocado trees, avocado trees change sex. Did you guys know that? So avocado trees don't have a sex specifically. Like they can literally go, oh, there's too many male avocado trees. Yeah, we're turning into females. Or literally go, there's too many females that we're turning into males. And it's a completely natural, normal process for avocado trees to be able to switch sex. And they do so automatically as per the surroundings and conditions. So there is something interesting about plants and trees. I mean, frogs can do this as well. So there literally is a crossover between some plants and some animals, I think. When we look at a plant and we look at a frog, what is interesting about a frog is it lives both in the air and the water element. Yeah? So am I right, guys? Does a frog have gills?
I'm not sure, actually. I have to look that up.
Or do they only have gills when they're babies? That's a really interesting idea, because yes, frogs have gills, but only during the first stage of their life cycles. Isn't that interesting? Right? So frogs have gills and they breathe water when they're babies. They become adults and then they breathe air. Like what? Like, is this for real? Like, you literally you breathe water as a baby and then you breathe air. And it's not quite the same as a child in a womb, because they're not actually breathing the fluids. They're literally just taking them into the nutrition center. So, welcome back, Gaz. Is Gaz back in the house? But I think that these are like important ideas to take on board, because frogs and avocado trees seem to have certain traits that seem to be crossing over, and you'll find this is more common. I think it's more common. Is it common? Is it common for plants to change gender as per surroundings while growing up? Because I know that cannabis plants, they're not sexed. They don't have gender till they get to a certain point. So it's not very common for plants to change their sex, apparently. Sex lability or sequential hermaphroditism. I always wondered why it is that you can't tell when a cannabis plant's a male or a female until it gets to the point where it's actually going into flower. And there's no way to tell. Isn't that interesting?
Well, I mean, if you think about how humans evolve, like, when you think about children, they're a lot more, androgynous until they grow up and reach puberty and become adults. So maybe it's the same thing with plants.
I think cannabis.
You can tell though from birth if a child's a boy.
But it gets more pronounced as it gets older.
For female cannabis plants, they're smaller usually, and the males are taller. So a lot of people, they'll go to pick certain plants and they take out the small ones because they think they're weaker, and they'll end up with all males sometimes. Have you ever heard of that before? It's like a blunder that some people make.
That's interesting. I didn't occur to me. It makes sense that the males would be bigger, right? Because the males have got to shoot out their seminal pollen over a long distance. So the taller you are, the more likely you're going to shoot out your pollen far away. The females just have got to catch it. So they don't have to be tall. They just got to have lots of wide limbs to catch, They're probably shorter with longer arms, longer limbs, longer tree limbs, bush limbs. So yeah, looking at the psychic and spiritual side of plants, you were talking about wood. Was it you, Indy? You were talking about hugging trees. And how many of you guys out there in the chat, do you guys hug a lot of trees? I usually do. I must admit I haven't been hugging trees as much as I should be. I'm going to go out and hug a tree this next couple of days because I haven't been doing it. I used to do it every day, like a few times a day. I need to get back on my tree hugging horse. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to maintain my title as a tree hugger. And I think it's a very important title for me personally to maintain. Have you noticed? So are we going to need tree huggers in the chat? Who of you are literally like tree huggers? Like, go on, don't be shy. Own up. Have you noticed that when you hug a tree, the first thing you feel is you want to pee? Cosmic, Indy, have you guys got this thing from trees? Have they spoken to you?
Sure.
It's like the tree speaks to my body. Yeah, Indy.
Yeah, maybe the tree wanted to be watered and it's telling you what it needs. They're powerful beings. But we do carry salt in our urine, which I don't know if they would want or not, but small amount of electrolytes probably could be good.
Our urine is harmful for grass, harmful for small plants, harmful for herbs, even harmful for weeds because of the concentration. But trees, it's not harmful. In fact, they need it because of the high percentage of ammonium and nitrates in our urine, right? If you pee on the grass, you'll lock out the grass. It'll be locked out of nitrogen, and it will end up becoming nitrogen deficient, which is ironic. The more nitrogen you give a plant, it becomes nitrogen deficient because it no longer can absorb nitrogen, because the nitrogen absorption, I think, has to happen at like a 6.5 to a 6. I think optimal nitrogen absorption happens at a pH 5.9 to 6.8, right? 6.4, whatever. But optimal potassium absorption happens 6.5 to 7.3. So when your plant is in flower, then this is cannabis we're talking about, right? But I'm sure that there must be something similar with other plants, because it probably has to do with the microbes. Oh, let's not forget microbes. We didn't add microbes to the list, but I think microbes need a place in this list because they're very important. So potassium is absorbed at a higher pH and it needs alkalinity. And when you urinate, it alkalinizes the soil, right? So the acidic processes required for the digestion and absorption of nitrogen is disturbed, and it actually locks the plant out of nitrogen, even though there's so much nitrogen in the soil. It's ironic, but it's how it works. But isn't that interesting? Like, I have always, ever since I was a boy, when I hugged a tree, the tree used to tell my body, hey, psst, what do you got for me? And your body is like, yeah, you know what? I got a little bit here. Even if you don't need to pee, your body will find a way to put out a little bit of pee for that tree. It's like the tree is talking to the physical bodies, telling it like it's placed in order, and your body's like, dude, I'll see what I can do. You know, maybe I've got some of that for you. So I think it's like really interesting, because I think trees and plants speak to our physical bodies on unconscious levels that we're not aware of. And that there's a kind of a, shall I say, physionommatic. Did I just invent a new word, people? Pay attention. Physionommatic telepathy. I don't know if it's a correct word. Like, because it's physiognomy, physiognomatic. Yeah, I think there's a word I've just made up because it's based on physiognomy. So there's this relation of something to do with the tree's relationship to the physical body, and it talks to our bodies. And when we hug it, it's almost like the shape of the tree. The shape of the tree talks to our bodies. Am I alone on this? Have you guys experienced this? Anybody in the chat? Tell me you guys know what I'm talking about, please. Surely there must be more of you that get this, you know? Yeah, Gaz. You know, that is the thing. Oh, Vince is rolling a joint right now. Good for you, Vince. Enjoy it. I hope it's some proper chronic, man. I hope you got some proper chronic that you're enjoying. You know, yeah, pee is useful stuff. Definitely. Yeah, there's an instant relaxation throughout the body, isn't it? Instant relaxation that you experience when you hug a tree. Now, this is really interesting because wood, the nature of wood, has an effect on electrical energy. So lightning will turn into fire. Hollowbone Hawk, welcome back. Yeah, you know, how trees relate to human bodies is like really really interesting. Like, I think there's definitely some very profound relationship which goes back to our ancestral lineage. I'm going to argue that plants and trees might be part of our ancestral lineage. What do you guys think of that? Is that going too far for you guys?
I think that kind of jives with me. Also, the fact that when the body dies and it goes into the ground, the roots of the plants are what are able to recycle it back into minerals and nutrients for other plants and from which the animals feed. So it's kind of like a whole system in which like all things are renewed and returned back to like flourishing abundance, and it's pretty amazing. But I feel like when you can kind of look at a plant as like having its head underground and its like limbs are like sticking out above the ground. To me, that's kind of how I see it, because the roots are like kind of like eating and drinking from the earth and bringing all that up through the xylem of the tree, or through the phloem of the tree, and the xylem being the bark protects it from evaporating out or being penetrated by UV. But sometimes what happens is like a little bit of phloem, which are like the little rings inside the tree of the wood, can actually grow outside of the bark or the xylem, and it creates what's called a burl. And the burls are usually connected by a small point. And one of my friends from that lives out in Colorado now, he said that those are the brains of the tree, and they cast them off because they don't need a brain. They've superseded the need for a brain to analyze anything. They're just one with their world. And it's kind of a poetic understanding of the tree burl, but it's an interesting like concept that the trees are like past the idea of like having to think or to even move. And so they can live in like a catatonic state and be in like full thrival, which means they're like really far more advanced than us. And like maybe everything at one point like diverged from this, but I feel like we all have a small amount of like photosynthetic capabilities. Like humans can create bioluminescence at very small amounts from our hands. And sometimes like sun gazing, when you're looking at the sun during the twilight hours, you can really gain that sunlight energy into your mind, into your cells. I feel like the mitochondria are like our connector to like being able to do photosynthesis at like small amounts, but they mostly perform like ATP and give us our energy through sugar and oxygen, which are provided by the plants, the oxygen. And the sugars are made from, if you go back far enough in the chain of life, you have the homotrophs and the heterotrophs. The homotrophs are the ones that can create from sunlight and inorganic minerals, organic nutrients. So the trees and the plants are the ones that are able to first transform the sunlight in rocks into what's organic. So without that ever having been done, there would be no material for the animal cells, even if it's a single-celled organism, or even the probably prokaryotic cells, to be able to really thrive. But interestingly, like prokaryotes like bacteria and eubacteria and archaea, and which are similar to our mitochondria, can exist out in nebulous clouds, which have amino acids in them, and can potentially like be the panspermia that travel through the cosmos that bring life from one celestial body to another. So I feel like maybe like bacteria come first, and then the plants are what are able to create from the celestial body that they land on, like the right environment to then host life that's more complex, like animal life. But I feel like first it comes from the plants and the trees, after the bacteria. And maybe we were like connected to both of those stages and we diversified from there. If you look at like a jellyfish, it's kind of close to that kind of transformation. The jellyfish forms as a polyp tree that's connected to the bottom of the sea. And then from then, the medusa parts, like the flower, buds off of the polyp tree and then kind of like subconsciously just kind of moves around. It doesn't really have like intentional ways to go, but it just kind of like flutters and it just moves through
It
its
wobbles off. Wobble, wobble, wobble.
So it's like kind of like a tree flower that kind of just starts to float around and go out and do its own thing. It's pretty interesting.
That is quite fascinating. You know, when we're looking at this, and it makes me think about like what you mentioned about the tree brain. And when you think about the head of the tree being into the ground, that's quite interesting. The roots, the head, the roots. Yeah, you know, it's quite interesting. You mentioned the microbes as well, and microbes is the gateway between trees and crystal. So now we're getting into the mineral world. Okay, so the minerals. This is very interesting because everybody requires minerals to live, to have a body, right? So the mineral is the baseline. And the only ones that can digest the minerals are the microbes, right? And the microbes share the minerals with the trees so that the trees can build the minerals into their substance so that the animals can eat the minerals from the tree substances that also contains the sugar necessary for the energy to produce the metabolism that gives the body the ability to absorb the minerals. And then the animals, some of them also will eat other animals which have gotten their nutrition from the plants that came from the sun. Then these plants, or this process of digestion, if you will, that is sort of isolated for the time being, will once again go a full circle and end up sort of recognizing and realizing, you know, this doesn't add up. It needs that cycle. And the mineral is the key to the excrement coming back down. Like, you know, these minerals now need to get out. We've got too many minerals in our system. And so it ingests the minerals and more bacteria into the soil through the poop, which can then help the soil to digest the existing minerals in the soil more readily to continue this wheel turning process. And so the minerals, I think of the minerals as being living beings, living entities, in the same way that I think of the microbes as being living entities, in the same way that I think of the plants and the trees being living entities and the humans being living entities. And I consider the minerals like rocks, like crystals, like, metals, as being sort of its own frequency of life. I don't know. What do you guys think, Cosmic, Indy? When you think of mineral, do you think minerals have its own order of life and intelligence in it? Yeah, hollow bone hawk. That's exactly what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that there are certain frequencies within the minerals that connect us to frequencies of other heavenly bodies. And that there's a resonant field, like a web between all the different planetary heavenly bodies that maintain a frequency that runs through all the heavenly bodies, so that this consciousness can pull these minerals into alignment and act through them. Hence, we need the minerals in our body for the consciousness to be able to act through our body, because it's got, I think, a lot to do with vibrational pitch and harmonics.
Yeah, I feel like minerals are like another form of living beings that are just non-cellular, because they are self-organizing and growing in order, and they resonate with our energies. So I feel like there'll be like probably more of like a primordial life form that came potentially before the cell development of the DNA. And so they were like just produced by like source mind to like have a brilliance about them and have like powers inherent within them. And
I always think.
yes,
Go, sorry. No, I was going to say, I always think of crystals as being the sort of the missing link between minerals and, organic sort of compounds and cellular levels. Because if you think about something like a crystal, it's the type of mineral that seems to behave most closely to an organism. If you think about it, if you think about just regular, sort of rocks, they're very smooth and kind of undefined. Whereas crystals can have incredibly complex structures that can't be defined simply by the just being shaped by the external environment around them. There's clearly a kind of it's because if you think about most minerals, more simple minerals, that they're just kind of shaped by the environment, the wind, water erosion, et cetera, et cetera. So there's only an external influence that's, creating their form. But with a crystal, there seems to also be that sort of internal dimension as well, that there's a sense of the shape and the fractal structure of the crystal is informed sort of insular in and of itself, in the same way that an organism has sort of an external awareness and a sort of an internal feeling state. It seems that crystals, in a lot of ways, I think it's because they're the most conscious form of minerals. So if you think of animals like humans, dolphins, apes, crows, etc., like we're kind of the cream of the crop when it comes to the animal kingdom, whereas I feel like crystals, they're kind of the geniuses of the mineral kingdom. So I feel like, and if you think about most organisms, they usually, and cellular organisms, their DNA and protein strands, they usually start at a sort of complex molecular structures. Like DNA itself is kind of like a mineral crystal.
That's an interesting take on DNA, and I would say it's like it makes me question just exactly what a mineral is and what a crystal is. See, here we've got gold, right? So gold is a cube, right? Cubic structure. Acid-base properties of higher valence oxide. So it's that must mean that its polarity is balanced. Yeah. What is the XE? Is this to do with the different? I'm guessing it's to do with the electron configuration. It's got to do with the different orbitals, isn't it? How many electrons are situated in the p, the s, and the o orbitals? And it's quite mind-boggling when you start to think about it, because you've got these 79, right? And these 79 need to be accounted for. And just how those 79 are distributed, or what maybe differentiates gold from lead. Maybe there's an extra one or two. They're playing another role, but essentially the differences won't be big. So there's definitely food for thought. Like if we look at potassium, like if we compare gold and potassium, for example, so gold is really fundamental. Let's look at potassium, because potassium has got that number 19, which is the number of the sun, right? And so it's that mystic solar number, which we're going to see in the atomic number. Here we go. And atomic weight of 39, as opposed to gold's atomic weight of, what was it, 139.96657. And those two numbers have got a slightly different relationship. And notice potassium is very simple, huh? So 4s to the 1. Isn't that interesting? So is potassium all the electrons in the s orbital? Does potassium hold all its electrons in the s orbital? and I'm just guessing here. While 19 electrons do not occupy s orbitals, it is classified as an s block element because its outermost valence electron is located in an s orbital. Okay. So the ground electron state configuration of a neutral potassium atom, neutral, so they get polarized or neutral, that's interesting, is 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, so 6 in the p orbital, 3s2, 3p6 in the other p orbital. So we've got 12 in the p orbitals and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 in the s orbitals, you know? And I'm supposing that like when the polarity shifts, it probably changes, right? So 10 electrons in the p orbital and s electrons in the s orbital. So where's the 19th electron? Hello? Is this just me or am I confused here? Let me share this page with you guys. Sorry, I forgot there. So looking at the grounded state of how this works. And the reason is because we know the s orbital is like a double teardrop, right? And the p orbital is the orbital that is around the o orbital. Yeah. So these are like probability spaces. So it's just interesting to see what it takes to bond electricity, because electricity has got to bond to this in some way that it can become polarized to absorb other minerals onto it to form complex mineral chains in order for cells to grow around it. It's just really interesting when we start to look at the mechanics of it, the biomechanics. What is Hollowbone Hawk saying? We think beings of only being inside a body or skin, but beings were bigger. Let me put that on the screen. But beings were bigger and less confined to a small location. Yeah, I think there's something to that as well. You know, we think of the compression of mass as being the be all and the end all of what we're experiencing, and the compression of mass has just got to do with those p and s orbitals and the way in which this collision's produced by those particular electron fields, and those collisions we experience as like boundaries, and those boundaries are what we're observing. But outside of those boundaries, there might be other kinds of boundaries that are not defined by those particular collisions that we're not aware of. So that's like an interesting perspective. And I think that plants occupy a bigger space than humans in that space. What do you think about that, Indy, Cosmic? Like on the energy plane, that plants occupy a bigger space.
I guess that makes sense.
They're pretty massive, a lot of them. But even the small ones proliferate a lot more, and there's so many more of them around together. Those animals kind of spread out more, and even the bigger ones are like more solitary.
I think that they're occupying a bigger time than us. They're occupying a bigger time frame. Like we're stuck in a very small linear time frame. They're in a bigger time frame, because from my experiences with the telepathy with plants is it takes very long for the thought of a plant to be downloaded by a human brain, and it takes extreme concentration and patience to be able to sit there for like 15 minutes hanging on every potential aspect of a syllable, right? And so you'll be sitting listening like intently, like for 15 minutes to catch one syllable. And then you got to be like hanging on for the next 15, 20 minutes. And if you concentrate intently for like 45 minutes, you've heard a few words, you know, of a sentence. Like you got to sit for hours just to get like one direct piece of information, because it's almost like the time that the plant is existing in is outside of our time space. And I think this has got to do with the consciousness of plants. I think the consciousness of plants are outside of our time frame space. And so what does that say about minerals? Because if the consciousness of plants are outside of our time frame space, minerals must be even further from our time space that humans are and mammals are in, which means that what Hollowbone Hawk was saying earlier about the minerals being the communication device between different planets, maybe on that frequency of being, time and space have very relative positionings. Maybe they hold a very relative space for minerals. And so this is why quartz and crystals, like you were saying, Cosmic, are like the most, crystals are like the big players of the mineral world. Crystals hold so much power and potential, you know. What have we got here? This is technically not a crystal. This is technically tektite, to be technical. If he gets technical, he's going to say that this is technically tektite. Technically. But what have we got here? We've got some crystals here. Where's our crystal here? Oh, this is a beautiful, this is Himalayan. Himalayan. What have you got there? That's smoky quartz, is it?
This is a really dark amethyst. Amethyst is a
is
type
it
of
an
quartz.
amethyst? Right. Yeah. I got amethyst here too. We got some dark amethyst here. This is a really lovely Brandberg from my lady love. Hollowbone Hawk gave me this beautiful stone. I always keep it next to me. I finger it a lot while I'm working. So I haven't been using my balls to work, but I have been actually, now that I think about it, handling this one quite a bit. And there's another amethyst that I'm particularly fond of, a very light one.
This light shows the color. I love it. It's a really dark one.
Yeah, it's pretty. Really pretty.
Yeah. I also have a big piece of lapis lazuli that I got recently.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
And I got this one on my neck. It's pretty big too.
Nice. I've also had a very good spot for lapis. A very tight spot for lapis, shall I say.
Right here.
I haven't been wearing lapis. Speaking of which, I haven't seen Hollowbone Hawk wearing her lapis in a while either. Reminding Hollowbone Hawk, wear your lapis. And if you need to rethread your lapis, remind me. I found my threading bits. I can't see what you're doing there very easily. Let's take a look. What is that? Is that quartz or citrine?
Quartz.
Nice. Pretty. Yeah, you know, it's very interesting when we start to look at our crystal friends. This is a very special one. This is one of the ones that inspired me when I was walking in India to get to collect all of its friends. I ended up buying everything the guy had. It was about 15 kilograms, 20 kilograms of stones. Like I just said, like, what you got? Bring them out. Like, I'm cleaning you out, dude. Like, let's negotiate. I want them all.
Has some citrine on it. Looked like it was orange on one part, or like red.
I have a very special citrine here. Here's a very special citrine. This is a Tao. Yeah. Natural citrine, of course. Not
Double
colored.
feminine.
No, it's a Tao. It's got the faces, the geometry of the faces. It's got a 7-sided figure with a 3-sided triangle, with a 7-sided figure, with a 3-sided triangle, with a 7-sided figure of the 6 faces that move around towards the point. So it's a 7-3-7-3-7-3 numerological configuration, which is called a Tao. And they're the oldest, most advanced form of crystal because it takes the longest for crystal to grow into this formation. The youngest form of crystal would be like what they call a generator quartz, which is just simple. So it's got to do with how many triangles they shape here. Like this. The This was growing towards becoming a Dao, you can see, but it had its growth. So on one side of it, it looks like it's got generator, but there's a beautiful triangle that was forming a triangle. That's complex geometry. So it was, the growth was arrested in various different ways, but this one's comes from the Brandberg, so they tend to have a lot of really interesting stresses and forces.
This one's called Monadnite, and it has kind of looks like desert rose, but it's in red.
Pretty beautiful, russet, nice.
And develop like orange cubicle crystals too that are separate, that are different. And it helps with ending procrastination. It'll help you bring tasks to completion.
It's orange. So what I would say was that orange. Okay, so let's pull out the enneagram. So what would the Bush Whisperer say? What would Franklin say? Franklin would say that the color orange relates to
this is also Monadnite.
Relates to, let me get that enneagram for you people. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, where's my enneagram? I hope this is a good enneagram I'm showing here. I don't like this enneagram as much. No, I do. I like this enneagram. I love this enneagram. I love this enneagram very much. Thank you, baby. Thank you very much. I love this enneagram. So, here we have an enneagram, and we're looking at number 5, right? So number 5 would be Mercury. And obviously there's a lot of numbers, a lot of colors you can relate to Mercury. It's not just one thing, right? But for the energy movement of the or the range of the range of possibility that light can cover, and the greatest range that light can cover is the greatest amount of movement. So the range, the range of orange relates to the number 5, which is the principle of movement, right, Indy?
Yeah.
So the principle of movement would then break lethargic energy. That's what Mercury does. It breaks lethargic energy. It gets you up and moving, and that's why Mercury rolls like, is highly energized signs. That color orange is very powerfully stimulating. So, this relationship between the crystals and the plants, I thought let's delve into that before we get to the relationship between plants and animals and humans. And should we group animals and humans almost in a single group, even though there's a division of intelligence between animals and humans? But when it comes to the DNA, there's not that much of a difference, right?
Well, animals are more developed than humans genetically. The amount of chromosomes is not really indicative of advancement or evolution. It just shows the amounts of change that had happened. But typically, animals have a lot more genes than humans have. And when they did the Human Genome Project, they found out that there was not even close to enough genes for us to make our own proteins. So they did the Human Microbiome Project. They found that most of our proteins are actually made by bacteria in our guts. And so having probiotics and having a good microbiome is like really important to having good health. And they kind of swept that under the rug. They don't want people to realize that just through diet and lifestyle changes, you can dramatically impact your vitality and your health by influencing your gut health and stuff. And like we have about 20,000 genes, which is very small compared to all the other animals and plants in the world. Most things have like 30,000. Even a flea, like a small flea, has 30,000 genes, and plants have like up to 40,000 genes. So plants seem to be the most developed genetically, and humans are like the least developed. in our chromosomes, we have 46 chromosomes, and apes and primates have 48 chromosomes. But there's something strange about our second chromosome, and it seems to have double material on our second chromosome. So it's like almost as if we have like really like 47 chromosomes, which is weird because when people have Down syndrome, they have an odd number of chromosomes. They're missing one, but they can have either one too little or one too more. And some people have suggested that if two people that have an extra chromosome were able to breed and make there be 48, it could become like a superhuman species. But it's all theoretical as to whether that could happen. But it's
We
very
should get those Down syndrome people breeding.
Yeah.
It's something wrong about that, but anyway.
But yeah, some people have speculated about that. This is pretty interesting.
They might not know what they're doing. Like, what? Why am I putting this in there? Just do it, Johnny.
Yeah.
Why is he putting that in here? Like, just do it, because they're like children sometimes. I've looked after people with Down syndrome, and they're very much like pure and natural, like kids. You know, they haven't fully grown up. And like trying to explain to them that they need to breed would be like really difficult for them to grasp. Like, you need to do this for the human race. Why? You're going to make better people.
Well, I think they're naturally inclined to do that. They're just kind of socially awkward about it. But I was in a movie called Girlfriend where this young clerk was like, I guess he was like a busser at a diner, and he thought this really cute waitress was his girlfriend, and she just played along with it to make him feel good. But I guess later on in the film, he finds out that she actually has a real boyfriend, and I guess he was kind of devastated. But I just appeared in one scene in the movie as an extra in the diner scene, and I haven't seen the film yet, so I want to see how it all plays out. But basically, like, people with Down syndrome are inclined to breed and stuff, and they're part of the gene pool, and people will marry them and have kids with them even. So it's natural for them, but they're just kind of awkward about it and stuff because their social and emotional intelligence can be limited. Some of them are more higher functioning than others. And there's a lot of them that are really impressive athletes. So they're an interesting group. One of the coolest things I found out about them is that they only have 2 sections on the finger, not 3.
Is that all of them? I mean, I've looked after a Down syndrome guy who didn't have that, but maybe that is a particular evolution that some of them have, or a whole lot of them have. It's an interesting concept. I've got this little doggy at the door banging on my door. He's a cheeky little bagger. Yo, he's so cheeky. Yeah, so that's quite interesting. Like the intelligence of minerals. I don't know, Cosmic, what do you think about the grade of intelligence? Are you with us, Cosmic, firstly?
Yeah, I'm here.
What do you think, like, the grade of intelligence of a mineral? Because I think they have intelligence.
Well, I guess you have to think about, like, how do you gauge the intelligence of a mineral? That's kind of where we start about. We think about the shape, think about the weight, its color, its structural complexity. All these things are definitely factors that you have to think about when you're thinking about intelligence, because, like, in a way, it's like you think about it, it doesn't really have like a mind. So in a lot of ways, its intelligence is essentially reflected and implemented through its purely by its shape and color and weight alone. Like, it has a sort of being in its existence that it creates that. And because it's a more complex structure, it can then sort of allocate different complexities in terms of its conscious perception, right? So I think a lot of ways, a simple thing, you have more, thoughts in your head, more ideas, the more complex concepts you're going to be able to come up with. And I think that the same is true for nature, in the sense that if you have a complex structure, you then have more options for sort of expressing what your being is, essentially. So I would think that, if we want to think of an intelligent crystal, it's something that's, reflective. I think that's also another big point, is the mineral's reflectivity and sort of its relationship to light. Does it reflect the light? Does it absorb it? Does it refract it in a certain way? I think all of these, like, aspects of minerals can be used to sort of determine the consciousness level of said mineral.
You know, that's interesting. Like, and then there's another element to it, right? Because I think we're not giving minerals, like, what about mood? What about mood? So we talk about the planet Mars, right? And we talk about Mars being like very active, like getting stuff, doing a task, like action, you know, and transformation, very much alchemical. Mercury and Mars share a very close resonance with this. Mercury represents the movement, Mars represents the doing of the action. So the movement of Mercury needs to have a cause that it fulfills for Mars to be happy. So that they work together, Mars and Mercury. So that's iron and Mercury work together. So we'll find a lot of technologies require iron and Mercury to work together. Some technologies, right? Give you an example. A thermometer, maybe. There might be an iron node in there to conduct the temperature. Steel, whatever, into the mercury so that the mercury's got a good conductor. I don't know. And building of motors and certain things that involve mercury. But like the mood of iron is like that Mars energy. The mood of Mercury is that changeable energetic potential. If you get too much Mercury on your skin, poisoning apparently, it causes your mind to become overactive to the point that we're like no longer psychologically stable, like insanity, right? Iron, probably if you've got too much iron in your blood, would you be too impulsive? I reckon you would be. If you don't have enough iron in your blood, would you not have enough impulse? Would you not be impulsive? Would you be more thoughtful? Is there a balance? Copper, what's copper do in the blood? Venus, right? What's the mood of copper? Copper's quite mystical, right? It's got a lot to do with like electrical potential, like probably very much, right? Gold as well. But copper, I think we've got more copper in our bodies than we've got gold. We've only got a little amount of gold. We do have gold in our bodies. We have to have gold in our bodies. We have to have copper in our bodies. We have to have iron in our bodies. And I think the composition of how much gold we have and how much copper we have and how much of, we probably have mercury in our bodies. How much of this metal and that metal we have in our bodies, it has a lot to do with the character that we display. What do you guys think about this relationship between the minerals in our bodies, our personas, our egos, our characters, and how the planets of astrological potential are radiating consciousness through our bodies? Do you think there's a relationship there with Mineral Kingdom?
Yeah, I definitely know there is, because magnesium has become a problem right now. It's the relaxing mineral, and it does over 300 functions in the body. And the way that we've been using our fertilizers, we put this like artificial fertilizer into our soil, and it is not bioavailable to us. So even though it has magnesium in it, it's not bioavailable to the microbes in the soil either, which are really crucial to be able to allow the polyphenols in the plants to develop, like lycopene in tomatoes and anthocyanins in blueberries. And these things are really helpful to help the body and the immune system clean up inside and protect us from dangerous microbes. They're the kind of things that keep the plants from being able to be attacked by molds and bacterias and microbes and stuff in their environment. So you look at these brilliant plants and they're so beautiful and shiny and they have that luster about them and they're protected. And then there's another one that's kind of like dried up and wilted and has like it's been attacked by blights and stuff. And you can tell there's a huge difference there. And that difference comes from the polyphenols, which are influenced by the microbes in the soil and the minerals that are available to them. And so when people don't have magnesium, it's a relaxing mineral, so it makes us more calm and relaxed. Not having it makes us more agitated, and not having potassium makes it so the muscles don't rebuild and leads to cramps, and that's painful and not fun. And so like various things like that can actually influence our mood dramatically. So having enough magnesium is important, and having enough copper makes a big difference as well. Having the right amount of iron and not too much iron. Iron can, if you're anemic, it can make you have bad circulation, which makes you get cold easier and more irritable. And then having too much iron can lead to a condition called hemochromatosis, which can lead to painful digestive pain in the lower regions, because the iron doesn't have any way of escaping the body. And so it kind of gets stuck and causes pain in the body. So having too much iron can be a really bad condition. But having like a lot of iron would probably, I would argue, make people maybe be hot as opposed to like anemic where they're kind of cold. So they might run hot from that. And that has its own kind of implications. People being too hot kind of get lethargic and moody. Whereas being cold, you can get like also like in a similar state, like lethargic or catatonic and moody, like kind of stiff. So it makes you kind of like less likely to be able to like be like up and about and kind of easy free flowing, to have too much or too little iron. So you want to have like just the right amount. But in order to absorb iron, it's supposed to take them with vitamin C.
Here's an interesting point, though. I think everybody's supposed to have a different amount of iron. Because I know a guy who went to a hospital. He was my ex-estate agent, right? In 2016. And they told him, look, Date, you got like 3 months to live. Like, you can settle your affairs. Maybe 6 months. There's nothing we can do for you. Like, you're going to tap out. Basically, this is the end of the road. You've got so much iron in your body. It's a mystery that you're still alive. We give you 3 months. So anyway, he quit his job. He became an alcoholic. Because he's like, well, what are you going to do? Well, he's on his way out anyway. He may as well have a couple of toots, Started smoking loads of weed, drinking way much more booze than he should have. And got to 3 months, he was still fine. Got to 6 months, he was still fine. Got to like 8 months, he was still fine. He went back to the hospital and says, why am I still alive? And they were like scratching their heads. They couldn't understand. And they checked him and he's still exactly the same as he was. He said, well, I don't feel any different other than like being an alcoholic. So now, thanks to you guys, I've got an alcohol problem. Anyway, it turned out that what you call that condition, what did you call it? Hemateliosis? Hemochromatosis. That's what they diagnosed him with. He was fine. And so the hospitals thought that he was on his way out, but that was just his natural body state of the amount of iron he needed. Now, my body's got a lot of iron in it and a lot of copper. I'm pretty sure. I'm very warm-blooded. I've got a very intense density of bones and muscles, like for my size and my weight. I've always weighed a lot more than what I look like I weigh, like since I was a child. And I've always been very hot-blooded as well, like I can be quite impulsive. That's why, like, when I write music, I don't sit and write the music, right? It's got to be an impulse. I got to sit down, and the impulse of the music's got to travel through me, and that's how the music's born, like in a song. And I've always been that kind of impulse-related person my whole life. Like I don't like to have a plan as much as I like to just follow an impulse. So I think there's something to that. And so my Mars is in conjunction with my moon in Taurus, right? And my Mars is like, it's in a strong position. And my Scorpio is my north node, right? So my Mars being in Scorpio and Scorpio being my north node, right? A very important place for my nodes and my moon, especially with regards to, where I'm moving in towards in life, my future. So Mars has got like a particular element in my makeup, as is Jupiter, right? Jupiter is my first is my first marching planet through the night, most of my planets are marching through the night. So like, but Jupiter is related to my first house, right? Which is ascendant Scorpio. So when you start looking at your astrology, you can understand, okay, tin. So what would tin do? If you've got tin in your body heals very quickly. So I've got a good amount of tin in my body. Copper as well increases the speed of healing. Copper increases the absorption of iron. So eating a lot of copper-based foods, very good. Copper is very good and important for microbes, for the microbes in your gut, for example. That's why like shiitake mushrooms is the best thing you can eat as a prebiotic. So when you start looking at like how this biochemistry, this alchemy of the body works within the system, I think that there's a lot to be said with how these metals operate within the body, right? If you've got more lead, how much lead does the average human being have in their body? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know how much lead we carry, but I know that lead can lead to antisocial and potentially psychotic behaviors. And a lot of people have been exposed to lead from leaded gasoline in the 60s, 70s. And so it's passed down through the bones into infants from their mothers for 3 generations. So we all have lead in our bones from our parents, from our mothers, and it influences our mood in such ways that make us more prone to antisocial behavior. So it could have led to like potentially the Flower Children Revolution and like counterculture societies as a result of lead exposure from lead paint and lead gasoline. But yeah, it has that kind of effect.
I think we need lead in our bodies.
They say that lead severs our connection to the divine light and our ability to commune with the divine spirit.
I think too much lead does that. But I think a certain amount of lead grounds us. Saturn. Think about Saturn and Capricorn, Aquarius.
Yeah.
That grounding energy, that Capricorn intense grounding, lead. Because most mammals have got lead. You go into a jungle where there's no cars, where there's no lead poisoning. Those animals in the jungle have got lead in their bones. It's part of the matrix. We would take in a certain amount. So they say that when we look at lead, what do they say? They say that, let me pull it up here for us. The average adult human body contains approximately 100 to 400 milligrams of total lead. 90 to 94% of this is stored in the bones and teeth, where it can accumulate over a lifetime. Only tiny trace elements circulate in the blood and soft tissues. So apparently we don't need lead for any biological functions, right? There is no safe amount, right? Any modern industrial humans carry anything from 300 to 500 times more lead than pre-industrial humans. So we don't need so much lead, right? We probably only need certain amount. We would normally, pre-industrial humans would only have had what? Like 10 grams of lead, 10 milligrams of lead. How much gold? Gold. Now, we've got gold in our bodies, right? So 0.2 milligrams of gold in the human body. Yeah. The total number of the gold would equal only 10 nanoliters. Right? If we were to gather all of the gold and melt it down into a single solid cube, each side of the cube would measure 0.22 millimeters. Isn't that an interesting number? 0.22 millimeters would be the size of the cube. If we were to, how much copper? So let's go with silver. So you can see these amounts are very small, right? 2 milligrams, silver, small amount of gold, copper. I think copper we can have a lot more. 50 to 120 milligrams of copper, right? Which is interesting. How much iron? There must be a massive load of iron in the human body. We've got 3 to 4 grams of iron in our body, right? So some people have got 3 grams of iron, some people have got 4 grams. I've probably got 4 grams of iron. I think it changes your temperament, it changes the way that your body grows. And it probably speeds up the metabolic potential for healing. Like you can probably check how much of these metals you've had in your body by how fast you've healed throughout your life. I've always been very lucky to heal very, very fast, you know. And my ex-wife always used to get very jealous. She used to get really jealous because like I'd get like a bad gash on my forehead or my face or something, and she'd be like, "Aren't you worried about it?" I mean, nah. And then like 2 weeks later, she's like, "Where was that injury?" I was, "Yeah, somewhere. I don't know." She's like, "I can't find it." I was like, "Well, you saw it happened." Like 2 months later, she'd be like, "Yeah, but you don't have scars. You don't have scars. That's so unfair. I get scars." You know, she didn't like, she's Cancerian. She didn't like that she got scars and I don't get scars. I was like, "Hey, I just don't care whether I have scars or not. Maybe that's why I don't have scars. You know, I'm not holding on to them." But I think like there's a lot of our temperament in the minerals in our bodies. And I think the temperaments of certain animals, like for example, which animals, now here's an interesting question, right? Which animals have the most amount of iron per kilogram, per gram in their bodies? Because we might find no, which species? Interesting, they say chickens. So the animals with the highest iron concentration per gram in their bodies are certain chitons. So these are mollusks in the sea, right? Oysters, clams, mussels, mollusks, dark meat, fishes. Isn't that interesting? So which land species, animals, badly written anyway. This is really annoying. You guys are winding me up, Google. Which species of land animals have the most iron? So among vertebrates and commonly consumed mammalian avian species. So the chickens. Now they're talking about which living species of land animals have in their entire whole body. Gosh, they keep trying to talk to me about nutrition and about animal food and stuff. Well, they're not giving me here, but I bet you that there must be a research somewhere that would cover, like, you know, which animals have got more iron in them. And you would probably notice there'd be a different temperamental trait. What do you think about this as an idea, Cosmic?
Could you repeat that again?
The idea that minerals carry emotional content and emotional states and mental states, and that depending on how much minerals our specific body has, each body has a different matrix, a different balance of how many minerals it needs. Like we don't all need the same amount of iron, we don't all need the same amount of copper, we don't all need the same amount of tin or silver or gold. We all have slightly different mineral complex. Silica, some people have more silica, they need more silica in their bodies, or their nails get soft. Some people need less silica. Everybody's unique. That our consciousness and our egos and our persona are highly affected by the intelligence that we bring into our bodies, which are the constituents of our bodies, which are minerals.
You know, that what that makes me think of is like, maybe in a sense we ingest the minerals that have the best harmonic resonance with our, you know, ego or persona, right? And it's like, if you have a certain persona, you're going to be attracted to certain minerals that reflect, you know, your consciousness. Because I've been thinking of this idea of sort of like, in terms of incarnation, that the Fae kind of teach me, is that you can't incarnate into a being that is not true to your nature. Like, or the idea is that if something is sort of distant from who you are and what your soul is, it becomes difficult to embody that being. For example, like, if, let's say if you're a very peaceful, you know, loving, kind person, you probably don't want to reincarnate as a crocodile. You know what I mean? You don't want to have that kind of preference. Whereas if maybe you're kind of a vicious, you know, mean-tempered, angry person, maybe you'd be like, oh yeah, being a crocodile kicks ass, you know? And so I think maybe it's the same thing with minerals, right? Like certain types of, because you even think about it, like if you have certain like interests or certain things, like you're going to have cravings for different types of food. Like if you're an intellectual person, you read a lot of books, you're going to have a certain cravings. If you're an athlete, you're going to have different cravings. Maybe if you're a dancer or a musician, you're going to have different tastes for food. And really, it's just kind of like, we take in the elements that seem to sort of harmonize with our soul or our consciousness. Because I was thinking about the interaction with like drugs the other day, because I was watching this this podcast that was talking about antidepressants and how a lot of that stuff is actually a placebo effect because it kind of generates like a thing. But I was thinking, but it made me think about our relationship to how the mind and body are affected, you know, by chemicals. And is it more so much like, is it the chemicals affecting the consciousness, or is it the consciousness affecting the chemicals? You know what I mean? It could be sort of either or. And so I don't know, I guess that's how I think of it.
It's a very interesting field of study though, isn't it? The relationship between temperament, mood, psychological state, mental ability, and mineral composition of a body, and how nuanced that mineral composition of a body is. And so within humans, we probably all have different temperaments based upon the different minerals that we are attracted to, like you say. But then because those minerals in our body, they support that kind of emotional complex. And what happens when we don't have the right mineral complexes in our body? Think about it. So let's ask the question, what is depression? What is mental illness? Let's just stop for a moment. Like I'm just like really pushing the boat out there. If we're gonna milk this cow, let's roll our sleeves up. We're gonna milk this cow. Let's roll our sleeves up and get in there and milk this thing. You know, could mental illness be because the human beings have chosen bad mineral combinations in their body? And those bad mineral combinations in their body are trying to conduct a different field potential of consciousness through their bodies. And their bodies are rejecting the field stream of consciousness moving through their bodies because it doesn't fit the blueprint of their souls. And so there's a dissonance between who they want to be and who they are being. And could that dissonance between who they want to be and who they are being, that we translate to various different kinds of mental, psychological maladies or illnesses, could a lot of that have to do with nutrition? And could the fundamentals of that be to do with the mineral composition, carrying the wrong field of vibration.
I had another interesting idea right now. What if the mineral composition of our body also affects things like taste in music or taste in literature or something like that? Like people like certain sounds and certain frequencies and vibrations because of that.
I think it's everything. Like, I think you're so right. I think it's like what we want to eat, it's what we want to do, it's how we talk, what we want to say, what thoughts we think, what emotions we feel, what we want to do, right? And so that's like a really interesting, because I've heard so many people saying that mental illness is very often to do with nutrition. Have you guys come across that in the chat? What do you guys think? Very often.
It's hard to say, because I think in a lot of ways, I think mental illness is also brought on by, tragedies and circumstances. Because I was thinking it's like, because a lot of times these theorists, the people who push these depressant drugs, their theory that they had was that they thought that depression was a lack of serotonin. So that by creating more serotonin, that fixes the problem. But that gets me thinking, are we depressed because we lack serotonin? Or are we depressed, and then because we're depressed, we then stop making serotonin because we're depressed? And if you look at it from that perspective, it really kind of changes the way you think about how drugs and chemicals interact with, substances. It's more like, is it more of the body reacting to the mood, or is it the mood reacting to the body? So I think in a lot of ways, if you have a certain thought or an intention or a feeling, like I say, you have something, a happy thought, that happy chemicals will then precede it. But modern science tells us it's the other way around. It's the chemicals first, then the feeling. But what I'm saying, what if it's the feeling, then the chemicals, in that different type of order? Because I think that really kind of demonstrates that phenomenon in a very different way, in a different context, because it shows more about how consciousness as it's about consciousness reacting to matter, rather than matter being the thing that controls consciousness. Because one of the things I'm thinking about this line of thought, and I know this is kind of weird to say to you, but it's like we're kind of getting down into that the slippery slope into materialism, where we start saying that every mineral compound is responsible for your consciousness. Because you think the Richard Dawkins type is like, yes, I agree with that, Bush Whisperer, you're one of us now.
There we go, the materialists. Woo, let's roll. But I do think that there is a connection. I don't think that the minerals dictate, but I think they enable. And without the minerals, the enabling can't happen. Does that make sense? Like, in a way that it's like halfway into materialism, but
probably,
not
I think it's probably a two-way streak. I think it's that the chemicals affecting the consciousness and the consciousness affecting chemicals. But I feel like in the modern world, we're basically told that we're sort of deterministically programmed by the chemical, structure in our body, and that we have really no free will or say in us. We're just kind of like a Rube Goldberg machine that's sort of undulating randomly into the universe, and we have no control over it. And I think that really understanding that more, that non-physical dimension of consciousness and how it interacts with the body, is something that is often lost in the conversation in the modern world.
I think that's really on point. And I think there's a lot of nuances to look at in this. But I think we're onto something. I think, like, consciousness, everything holds consciousness. This is why the ancients, like, let's apply this to witchcraft. Go on, let's have a bit of fun. Let's apply this to witchcraft for a moment, right? And magic and occult practices, sorcery, mysticism, right? Because that's sort of like what we're actually discussing at the end of the day. It might not seem like it, but it's what we're talking about. It's where this is all going fundamentally. So, like, a witch in a practicing their trade of witchcraft, or a wizard practicing their magic, or a mystic, diving deep into their esoteric mysticism or occult practices, they would do a ritual. And let's say you wanted to gain a particular quality. Let's say you wanted to gain bravery and a quality of Mars. Then you would get the metal iron, right? and you would do a ritual that involves certain acoustic resonances that are considered to be in relation to the iron resonance, sacred power words, right? And you would draw pictures, certain yantras or certain sacred geometric patterns or certain sigils that you believed can capture the essence of that iron energy consciousness, right? And you would use your iron and your sigil, and you would look at the stars. When is Mars in a positive place? You might think, when is Mars in a good place on a Tuesday? Because Tuesday is the day of, Diwas, of Mars. And you might then construct a ritual, and this is common for all witchcraft or magic or sorcery, whatever you want to call yourself, even if you're a mystic, even the Vedics practice their pujas. You would then invoke your power and invoke the consciousness into the substance and use it to draw and pull down more of that essence into that iron object that you would then wear across your body like a layman, just for example, or as a bangle, or you would make you would use ceremonial magic, right? And witchcraft is not that different. You might make a special dagger, a thame or something, using this iron that you've now empowered, for example, for your craft, and capture that element of that Mars energy using the iron. And you could do the same for the solar energy for the sun, or the copper energy for Venus. And you'd have the certain colors that you would be visualizing and colors that you would be using as a backdrop, and you would be facing a particular direction as per the elements. And there'd be a little bit of scientific nuances depending on what kind of witchcraft or what kind of sorcery or what kind of magic you're practicing. There'd be tables of correspondences that you would use, right, in order to fulfill and cast that spell, that magic spell. So now looking at it in that context, cosmic and indie, looking at that and then coming back to where we were a minute ago in the conversation about how the mood of our consciousness has to be relative and relevant. In other words, we can eat the wrong foods and put the wrong minerals into our bodies, and then our consciousness that we're carrying will not match our bodies. And if the consciousness that we're not carrying doesn't match the frequency of our bodies, there should be dissidence. And that dissidence should produce a certain kind of friction. And that friction we could be terminalizing as mental illnesses or physical illnesses, depending on the particular friction. And so a lot of nutritional problems could be too much of this mineral, too little of that mineral, or psychological problems could be too much of that. Like we look here, for example, just looking at one of the so-called important minerals, you need to have a very particular amount of iron, magnesium, and zinc, right, for the biochemical pathway stool for the synthesis of serotonin, right? And there's over 300 enzymatic. Now here's where it gets interesting. So the enzymes are the microbes in the body. So you're going to have 300 different little characters playing roles with magnesium alone, right? And the enzyme tryptophan hydroxylase will be playing an important role for your iron and your zinc, right? Would be influencing the synaptic transmission, right? And it acts with glutamate pathways. When you see that glutamate in food, pay attention, people. Pay attention. This is important. When you see a food label and it says this glutamate, that glutamate, imagine what we're talking about here, right? Synaptic transmission, right? The synapses are the spaces between the neurons. And so your brain cap is full of synaptic spaces which is like little salt solutions where the electrical impulses jump, and it's got to be exactly right. So it interacts with glutamate pathways. So when you see this glutamate and that glutamate in your food, can that affect your neural glutamate pathways? I'm just putting this out there for you guys to start paying attention to what you're eating and ensuring serotonin is utilized effectively once manufactured. So it's not just the uptake and the manufacture of the serotonin, but it's actually got to be used. Then you need the vitamin B6, which is, pyridoxal 5-phosphate. Once again, a complex chain of minerals that fit together, right? Vitamin D, B9, folate. These are all going to play significant roles. Isn't it interesting that folate plays an interesting role in the synaptic movement of we know that folate's important for your skin and stuff. Did we recognize how important it was for this? Amino acid serotonin is built entirely from the essential amino acid tryptophan. That amino acid, in case you're interested, you get a lot of it from cashew nuts, chickpeas, right? Chickpeas and cashew nuts are probably like very rich sources of tryptophan. They say you get them in eggs and legumes and meats. Peanuts probably have them, other kinds of legumes, and you're probably going to find a whack of it in lentils and stuff like that too, although check that out. Because about 95% of the body's serotonin is manufactured in the gastrointestinal tract. Isn't that interesting? 95% of it is manufactured in the gut, right? So if your gut microbiome isn't on point, then your serotonin levels won't be on point. So, hello? Why are we giving people drugs for psychological illnesses when the medical industry itself is pointing out through the medical science that is mainstream that 95% of your serotonin is produced in your gut, and that having nutritional deficiencies is going to severely disturb, and some of these substances and additives in our food is going to disturb the ability of the serotonin to move through our systems, right? Especially with the synaptic this communication that we read about. What was it? Synaptic. What do they call it? Synaptic. There was a word for it, but it basically means the transmission, synaptic transmission. Yeah. So isn't it interesting that we've got this materialistic attitude of only you just take a drug to fix your brain chemistry, instead of looking at what's going on in your gut? Because if 95% of your biome, 95% of your serotonin is made in your gut, and you don't have a healthy gut, then if you are depressed, it's got to do with a gut problem, not a brain problem. So why are we giving depressed people drugs when they have probably, most likely, according to what we just read, and we take that what we read is now in the mainstream, this is medical science. If we've got gut problems, should we not be addressing the gut problems? Should we not be looking at the biome in our gut? Because the biome in our gut is also going to also have a very powerful effect on what minerals we're taking into our bodies. Yeah, Cosmic.
Yeah, I was just thinking about in terms of shit. I lost my train of thought. About what was I going to say? I was just thinking is so I don't know. I'll get back to it.
All right, we'll let it come back to you. Chaya from Toronto wanted me to mention that there's a bunch of vital minerals that we can get from various foods, and we can get iron from spinach, lentils, and pumpkin seeds, calcium from sesame seeds, yogurt, and leafy greens, magnesium from almonds, dark chocolate, and legumes, mercury or zinc actually from pumpkin seeds, chickpeas, and cashews, and phosphorus from beans, dairy, and fish. And then finally, copper from mushrooms, nuts, and cacao or cocoa, and calcium from leafy greens, tofu, and sesame seeds. So a lot of nuts and seeds are mentioned in there, and like people don't really have nuts and seeds as the part of their staple of their diet. It's usually like meat and bread and cheese. And like sometimes it doesn't really go far beyond that. But people have starchy vegetables like potatoes or corn, but not really green vegetables. And if you're not getting green vegetables in nuts and seeds, a lot of your problem is diet based, whatever your condition is. Usually it's a mood associated with a physiological thing as well. Oftentimes being from the gut health being the first cause of both of those things. And so through functional medicine, you can get tests to see where your mineral levels are at, where your hormone levels are at. And this is like old medicine that's coming back. It's influenced by Eastern medicine, which is why it's considered to be integrative medicine, integrating Eastern and Western. And this kind of medicine, you go there, they give you diet and lifestyle prescriptions. It's like, this is what you need to try. Try this elimination diet. Try adding this into your diet. Try doing this kind of lifestyle change. And you come back and then they'll find that like, oh, wow, this really helped your gut health and the physiological condition and the mood thing has subsided too. So they have a lot of testimonies where that happened to be the case. And it's really amazing how shifts in diet to add missing minerals in our physiology can really help fix the situations that we get ourselves into. To me, I feel like these pills that they give people for depression cause a higher likelihood of suicide. I think what they're trying to do is just weed those people out or just keep them suffering and have to need more and more help.
Well, I was going to answer Bush Whisperer's question earlier about why are they going after, why are they using pills and not going after the gut? And I think the answer is simple, is that so many people still assume consciousness is exclusive to the brain. The idea that depression comes from the gut is actually kind of threatening to materialism itself, because it's almost like they want to like, okay, we're going to acknowledge consciousness, but it has the smallest, most insignificant role possible. It's just in the brain, just that. Everything else is dead and unconscious. And then having the idea that consciousness is something that's more uniform throughout the body, well, then that kind of opens up the idea of like panpsychism and things like that. So in a lot of ways, like you have to think about like the narrative of, what medication is basically saying is that you don't really have, because also what's really communicating to the person is that you don't have free will. You're just this sort of this brain that's sort of undulating sort of randomly via the deterministic processes of the universe, and simply just by putting a little tweak and a correction, then you'll magically be happy. But then if you think about like how dark that is, that if you're just this, deeply depressed person and you got some trauma in your life, and then some just random chemical just magically makes you happy and makes all that trauma completely meaningless. I don't know. There's something kind of like dark just about the implication of that, even if it was true. Like thinking about like how you're just literally nothing more than the atoms in your brain. And so if we just change the atoms in your brain, then presto, changeo, you're fixed. But it's ignoring the kind of the non-physical aspect of our consciousness, that part of us that isn't really defined by, matter or cells or, whatever that. And the pills, in a lot of ways, it's just sort of the idea that your mood is just, it's not some deeper spiritual thing. It's just some kind of little like button we got to tweak inside your brain. Oh, just move this lever here and presto changeo, you're happy now. That just, all that really does is it reinforces the idea that you're a robot, that you're a machine. Because if you think about it, a machine, when you fix a machine, you get your pliers, your screwdrivers, etc., and you get in there, you change the part and you fix it. But if you think about like, a doctor or a veterinarian or something like that, it's not really that kind of process. It's more about finding, the equilibrium of the body and the habits and the diet and, the things you do. And it's not like you could just, flip a switch and you're magically that. And I think that's really the problem with all this medication culture that we're basically implemented within our society, because it reinforces the idea that you're just some robot that can be easily programmed, and all of your deep emotional feelings that you think are spiritual are nothing more than a meaningless chemical reaction of dopamine and serotonin in your system. It's just purely mechanical. And then it's so dehumanizing when you really start to think about it. And I don't know. I think that's one of the big reasons why, because you're talking about like, having to medicate stuff, because it reinforces the idea that you're nothing more than a machine. There is no divine spark. There is no soul or spirit or consciousness. Because if you think about it, if there is a soul and a deeper consciousness, then when it comes to things like depression, anxiety, anger, etc., then there's another dimension involved that isn't chemical, and that kind of creates an uncertainty. Because I think with science is that, and the implementation of science is it giving us a false sense of confidence in terms of our understanding of the world. And I think that also goes into medicine and things like that. And when it comes to antidepressants, like every person I hear like takes them, they don't really seem like they're getting better anyway. And a lot of that is just, placebo effect for the people who it does work for the most part.
There's an interesting point here. And I think like you're so on point with what you're saying, how much of it is placebo. That's something I would also want to like think about and consider. One thing that I'm thinking about here is like, and I'll try not to be too long with this, like copper. So copper and gold affect electrical current in different ways, right? Copper's got the more conductive. Gold has 70% of the electrical conductivity of copper, right? It's got to do with the valence electrons. It's got more of the electrons free. But gold doesn't oxidize and corrode. So that's why you'll find like connectors might be gold, because it means they're going to last. But the copper is like going to conduct the current better than the gold plating. Usually there'll be gold plating on the electrodes, which is interesting because it's going to affect the conductivity. Something I never really thought about in a big way. But so what does copper represent, just from a metaphysical, if we're thinking in terms of magic, witchcraft, the occult, sorcery, what does gold represent? Well, gold represents unity, represents that which unifies, right? Unifies the life force principle, brings prana into extension. And what does copper represent? Copper represents harmony between two different things. So copper acts as a harmony vessel between one element and another element. So if you've got a positive anode and a negative cathode, and you want to bring them into a state of harmony, copper will do that for you most readily. That's what Venus's role is. So you can see that copper has an emotional content to act a little bit like Libra, or to act a little bit like Taurus. It'll be like Taurus when it needs to, and it'll be like Libra when it needs to. It'll be a toric field that will draw and conduct through its toric field, and act like Libra, where it will just balance the scales between A and B. So you've got an anode, you've got a cathode, and you want to balance these two. That process of balancing it, that harmonizing, is what we call the conduction of electricity. Gold, on the other hand, is all about integrity. Gold is about unity and integrity and integration. So gold will maintain itself. Gold will elevate to the point where it won't corrode. So gold will last the longest. It's the most noble metal. So gold is then carrying the vibration of the sun. The vibration of the sun is to be the center of a hub and to be an integral central point around which the wheel is turning. So gold then doesn't corrode. So it's really interesting, and you can break down all of the emotional attributes of the planets into the metals. And so does that mean that iron, right? Iron has the most magnetic potential, right? So iron has got to do with magnetism. So desire, right? So does the element of iron hold a strong desire aspect of consciousness? Does the element of gold hold a strong integrity to bring things together aspect of consciousness? Does the element of copper hold a strong harmonizing effect of consciousness? So if you've got a whole lot of copper together, it's a powerful harmonizing effect. And that's for conductivity. And if you've got a whole lot of gold, it's a powerful integration. It'll integrate, things won't break down. If you've got a whole lot of metal together, it'll have a powerful magnetic effect for the desire, right? Magnetism and desire are connected, right? That's why you say personal magnetism and sexual chemistry has got to do with desire, because there's literally a link. So isn't that an interesting idea that we can backward engineer the emotional state and the mental state of each different element, and that those elemental elements have got consciousness? And when we to break this down to the mineral kingdom, it means that each mineral carries its own particular frequency of consciousness, and we can map this all. There are many maps in witchcraft, in the occult, in magic, in sorcery, that we can use these tables. So this is a new way of looking at all of those tables of correspondence that we see when we look at different occult schools of thought, right? And it's just an interesting concept for you guys to be able to apply this on a practical level, right? So next time you're thinking about these tables of correspondences, which is the second field of hermetics, which is correspondence, right? The field of correspondence, then the principle of correspondence being enacted, to think of these metals as a go-between and these minerals as a go-between between different frequencies of macro consciousness, which are symbolized by different planets, star systems, and that those particular planets carry a lot of that mineral vibrational element. There must be a lot of gold in the sun, right? There must be a lot of copper on Venus. There must be a lot of mercury on Mercury. There must be a lot of lead on Saturn. Do you see where I'm coming from here? And that frequency of lead must be rich around Saturn, which is why the lead here is resonating with Saturn's lead, and why the copper here is resonating on the frequency with the copper of Venus. And so here's like a really interesting, Mars must have a lot of iron on the planet, in the planet, right? For that vibration. And we can start to sort of map out how the cosmos is like a map of our internal bodies. And that depending upon which elements of those planets we've got in our body, different moods and different elements of our personality, but we have to have the right harmony balance, because we have a blueprint which is spiritual. And that blueprint is what we were meant to be doing. And if we have the wrong body minerals, right, then our body will be in dissonance to our consciousness, which will produce a mental illness or a physical illness. Isn't it really fascinating when you start to think on this level? Suddenly, all of those charts of correspondence that we see in the cult, don't they make so much more sense? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think so. And also there's other factors of the planets and celestial bodies that are associated with these metals, like the color of them is another thing that's strongly associated with the various metals, but not always the case. But also like the size of Saturn. Like Saturn is a large gas giant and carries a lot of planets with it, so it's got a lot of like heaviness about it, and it's got its rings. And so I think it's the heaviness that appeals to Saturn about the association with the lead, the dragging of those many moons that it has that go around it as well. And interestingly, I got this chart I wanted to share. That's the box flower chart, and they talk about various plants and their impact on our mood. And I wonder if maybe these impacts come from the minerals that they carry. And I made sure to mute this share screen that I'm trying to share. All right. So here we have two different rows of various plants, and like I'll just read a couple of them to you. It's very like insightful things that they're meant to work on. So like agrimony, the one on the top left, says inner turmoil or inner torment hidden behind a cheerful face. and the outcome of taking it is peace of mind and inner harmony. Then there's aspen, fear of unknown things, which provides courage and inner calm. When you take the homeopathic version of this, so they take like its concentrate and put like a small drop of an extract or essential oil like into a large body of water, and then it kind of like reflects its nature, and then you take this like homeopathic and it does this stuff for you apparently. Now we have beach, which is the third one down on the left, says intolerance of criticism of others, and it leads to tolerance and understanding. So there's like a lot about agreeableness and calmness and harmony and clarity of thought, various things that could be influenced by like either minerals or like the repertoire of minerals that they carry. So they might carry like a combination. And these were like some of the first medicines of mankind. We weren't able to extract these minerals or metals as their own thing, but we were getting them from various berries or fruits or flowers. And I think a lot of these are obtained from the flowers or the buds. So like they have red chestnut on the right side, gives over concern for the welfare of others, and then can provide when taken trust and calm in relationships. So they're very insightful things, but they're very particular. And I wonder how much insight was used to develop this chart, but it seems to be very popular. I have it on my wall back here. I got one over at my spiritual center, and they mention a lot of things most people have probably never heard of, like various flowers, but a lot of these flowers are familiar ones. But if we start to implement the use of these medicines, it could really have a greater impact on the mood as compared to like these pills that they give people. And so they're like really subtle little insightful things that they can provide where people have like very particular issues that they can kind of look through this and find out like maybe I need to start taking this flower. And it said that humankind was able to live to be like 900 years old before the flood because we used flowers and leaves and roots for medicine, and we mostly ate nuts and seeds, and we also would have like the fruits and the vegetables. But they thought in those times that things like grain or grasses and meat and dairy milk were considered to be things that were famine foods that were not necessary to ever eat unless it was the only thing left. But now it seems like things have flipped in our society where we eat mostly famine foods. And these foods are things that we don't eat at all. Like I go around and I'm a forager. I teach people how to forage when you're walking on like a trail in the woods or like along the lakeside. There's certain things you can eat. Like grape leaves are extremely delicious. So you could just chew them up. They taste like a grape. You can have honeysuckles. Honeysuckles are very sweet. It's very small drips of honeysuckle on the little pistils of the flowers. You can eat begonia buds. They taste like a grape. Or mountain sorrels, also known as shamrocks. They just look like a clover, but they have little heart-shaped leaves. They're delicious. They're kind of a sweet tart taste to them. There's also rabbit weed. It looks like these little seeds, and you pull off the little seeds and bite on them. And they're tiny, but if you eat a bunch, they taste really sweet and spicy, kind of like arugula, but like a little spicier. Like these little plants that we see that people don't really pay much attention to are really medicine. And like we have like the jewelweed and the plantain, which are good for like skincare medicine, and yarrow and burdock and like mugwort and all these like really interesting things that most people don't come across. They have really powerful healing implications and powers that they carry. So it's pretty great that we can like really tap on this ancient wisdom and start to bring this back into our world, because it seems like it's got a lot to offer. There's so many little things that people struggle with. Like the Star of Bethlehem is good for people that have shock and trauma, and it can provide a comforting and healing effect. So like I know a lot of people that could use Star of Bethlehem, and I help a lot of trauma clients that are, veterans and carry PTSD from various incidents, and I can help them with various modalities, but this would be nice to add to it. And like olives, for example, like a lot of people eat olives, but it says here that if somebody has a complete exhaustion in physical and mental health and vitality, then they can have olives, which will renew their energy and vitality. And like a lot of people know that if you take a spoonful of olive oil, like cold pressed virgin olive oil, before bed, it's like compared to if you compare it to some ridiculous thing, those, what are the names of those shots people get to make their lips fuller and stuff? I can't think of what it is. But they say it's like as good as something like that. You don't need to get any surgeries or anything. Just make your skin look young and supple again by having those omega-3 rich fatty acids, which are also good for your brain. And they say if you're not having a lot of omega-3 rich fatty acids in your diet, your brain starts
And your
to
joints.
and it's really good for your joints. It lowers inflammation in your joints. But if you don't eat like walnuts or olive oil or olives or avocados, they say that your brain shrinks over time after you're like 18 or 21 years old. It just shrinks gradually as you get older. But if you eat more omega-3 rich fatty acids, it will start to grow and heal and reach new heights of intellect and mental acuity and memory and cognition and things like that. So having things that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids are like very resembling of seafood, which is like rich in omega-3s. So there's also, if you don't like seafood, you can always get those omega-3 rich vegetables. But they're very helpful for a lot of things. I know a lot of people have joint health issues, especially once they get over a certain age. Collagen production kind of drops, and people have a hard time like doing squats, using their knees, and having more anti-inflammatory oils from omega-3 rich foods and stuff can really be helpful for that. But they also suggest that people take collagen after like they get into their 40s because collagen production kind of drops. But I recently realized that if you take caffeine, caffeine stops collagen production. So, I mean, how many people love caffeine and drink caffeine every day? Probably like a majority of people, but they don't realize that it's causing them to rapidly age and drop their collagen production. So maybe they'd rather have people have to pay to buy more collagen at a certain age than they would be willing to let people know they can stop drinking caffeine so that they don't even have to do that. But caffeine is very addictive, so it's hard for people to walk away from that oftentimes. They mentioned here for walnuts, the difficulty of adapting to change, and then adaptation to the change is the result of taking the walnut homeopathic. And walnuts are really good. That's like kind of something that's also helpful when you take certain things that help with mood, adaptability, and agreeableness. Serotonin is important for agreeableness, and in order to boost serotonin, you want to get and also melatonin, you want to get tryptophan, which most people think of tryptophan they associate with turkey, but you can also get tryptophan from sunflowers and from tart cherries, and it's very effective.
Before you move away from walnuts, you said the walnuts are good for adapting to change?
Yeah, that's what it's saying here.
So the polarity between Taurus and Libra, what does the scales of Libra do? They adapt to change. And what does the tauric field, Taurus, do? It stabilizes that adaptation. So copper is important for the adaptation to change. Now, you get 0.45 milligram per 1 ounce of 28 serving. So walnuts is an excellent source of copper, right? as well as the omega-3 fatty acids, which I'm guessing walnuts rich in copper, and which enzymes? Because where there's a copper, there'll be enzymes that work with that copper. Does that make sense? So cytochrome and oxidase, right? So these, the terminal enzyme in the mitochondrial electron transport chain, right? We're talking about adapting, are we? So those cytochrome and oxidase, you're probably going to find those enzymes where there's a rich copper source. You see how these things work together? And then you've got lysyl oxidase, necessary for cross-linking the proteins collagen and elastin. And so what does your skin do? Your skin contains you. It's like a field of containment that is an adaptive field between you and your surroundings. So isn't it interesting how the particular nutrients and minerals that you'll find within walnuts are exactly the particular moods and qualities of those minerals and microbes that need to be in a conjunction with those minerals? But please do carry on, brother. I just thought I'd add that in when you said walnuts.
Cool, thanks. And I have this chart here that Chaya gave me that has associations with various celestial bodies with the different metals, but it's not like the one we were talking about earlier with like the alchemy associations of the various metals with the old symbols and stuff. But what they're saying is that sun is associated with iron, the moon is associated with calcium, Mars is associated with magnesium, Mercury is associated with zinc, Jupiter is associated with phosphorus, Venus with copper, which is consistent, and then Saturn associated with calcium. So I don't know where these associations come from, but maybe this is a connection to a different system. Maybe the Vedic system has these associations. I'm not sure. But
those aren't necessarily contradictive, because there's not just one thing that carries the frequency of the sun. Right? There's not just one thing that carries the frequency of Mars. Mars and the sun are very closely related, right? Number 9 and number 1 in the Enneagram. Does the number 9 not literally become the number 1 in another octave? It crosses the event horizon, it becomes the 1 Mars. And so Aries and Leo are like the tightest of friends, astrologically speaking, because of this, right? Like Aries and Leos get on really well, like they generally do. They would be like thick as thieves, as the saying goes. It's why it's a really good combination for partnerships, whether it's business or romantic or whatever. Aries and Leos fit like two peas in a pod. So there's this interesting, but like a lot of these other elements, if you think of Venus isn't just copper. Venus is going to be copper, and Venus is going to be this, and there's going to be a long list of different elements that relate to each planet. And these are just some of the other elements that relate to the planets that are mindful. And Mars, and the sun might have a strong resonant element with magnetism as well as Mars, as well as metal. But it's probably a different quality that they're mapping. They're not mapping magnetism, right? Because when we're talking about iron is a magnet. It's one of the most powerful fields that iron has. But that's not the only thing that iron does. So there's obviously something more to do with iron bonding with gold, probably. But it's interesting. It's interesting. And I don't think like it's that just because there's different minerals that it necessarily contradicts, because I still think that Jupiter would still be related to tin, and the moon would still be related to silver, as well as. So the moon is going to have so many different frequencies. For example, you've got moonstone. It's also carrying the moon's vibration, as well as many different things. Like the element of water is carrying quite a lot of the moon's essence. So yeah, I think there's space.
And then I also have a connection where we have the various metals and the help that they do for the body. So for calcium, it helps with strong bones, teeth, muscle contractions, nerve function. Magnesium, as I mentioned, supports over 300 enzyme reactions, muscle relaxation, sleep, and heart health for men. Potassium regulates blood pressure, muscle and nerve function, and hydration. Sodium maintains fluid balance, nerve signals, muscle function. Iron makes hemoglobin to carry the oxygen, supports energy. Zinc for immunity, wound healing, hormone production, and skin health. Iodine is essential for hormones and thyroid function and metabolism. Selenium is an antioxidant for the thyroid function, immune support as well. And then copper for iron metabolism, collagen formation, and brain function. So interestingly, copper influences iron metabolism and can help balance out the iron, put it to the right places where it needs to be. Then we have manganese for bone formation, phosphorus for bones, teeth, and energy production. And then chromium helps insulin regulate the blood sugar. And molybdenum helps enzymes process the proteins and toxins. But I've taken chromium for like a weight loss supplement. It basically like takes the sugars and the fats and then breaks them down and helps the body use them up. Chloride for fluid balance and stomach acid production. Fluoride strengthens bone enamel and prevents cavities, apparently. Boron supports bone health and vitamin D metabolism. Silicon may help support healthy skin, hair, and nails, and connective tissues. Nickel, trace amounts are sufficient, and vanadium may influence metabolism. So those are ones people haven't really heard much about. They have important, and it's interesting that chloride and fluoride are in the list, but I don't know if they're. Because fluoride is an industrial waste product, so they try to put it into food products and like pay and find ways to not have to pay to have it dumped. But as many know, and calcification of the pineal gland when exposed to aluminum. Aluminum and fluoride are a bad combination. They say that chemtrails release strontium and barium and aluminum, and strontium and barium can block sodium and potassium channels in the body to prevent the ability for the body to hydrate and repair muscle tissue. So that's gonna be tough.
This is probably a good place for us to be wrapping it up. I'm trying to wrap it up within 4 hours, trying to become disciplined. Cosmic, is there any more that you want to throw on the table, dear brother?
I don't think so.
Well, this is probably a good place to end, a good solid chunk of nutrition, because we're talking about the mineral relationship and how the herbs and plants carry a lot of enzymes and a lot of minerals. So the herbs are the mineral carriers into the animals, and the animals use the herbs and the minerals, the minerals and the enzymes to stimulate their enzyme reactions. So there's this perfect synthesis between mineral, herb, animal, human, and we're all part of the same proverbial circus. Well, I hope you guys got what you came for. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. It's been an absolute honor here, and we're going to crank this off just before the 4-hour mark. I want to learn how to share this to other channels. Hopefully within the 4 hours, I should be able to. I'll just have to change my account with this StreamYard. But thank you all for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Sending you all big love and big blessings. And it's been an honor here with you guys as well, Cosmic and Indy. Big love and blessings to you guys. Thank you guys for a really exciting and enjoyable conversation. As always, big love to everybody. Big bless. Om Shanti.
All right.